Imagine if every single problem in your life, from losing a job to failing at something big, wasn't the end of the road, but the start of a brand new one. The truth is, problems are not walls. They're hidden doors to growth, success, and opportunity. In this video, I'm going to show you how to flip setbacks into stepping stones and reframe challenges so they actually work for you, not against you. So if you're ready to turn failure into fuel and rejection into redirection, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because what you're about to learn could change the way you see every obstacle in your life. Reframe problems as opportunities. Most people see problems as heavy weights dragging them down, obstacles that block progress, or painful setbacks that derail their plans. But the truth is, every problem hides within it a seed of opportunity, if you know how to look at it differently. Reframing problems as opportunities is about shifting your perspective so that what first looks like a wall transforms into a doorway. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me? What hidden chance is buried here?" That single shift changes your emotional state from frustration and helplessness to curiosity and strength. Think of losing a job. At first, it feels like a crushing blow, a loss of stability and identity. But when reframed, it becomes a chance to finally pursue the career you've dreamed of, start your own business, or break free from a toxic environment. The problem turns into a push, something that forces you to move in a direction you may have resisted otherwise. The same applies to rejection, failure, or even personal struggles. Reframing them doesn't mean pretending they're not painful. It means recognizing that pain itself can be a guidepost, pointing you toward growth you never expected. This mindset unlocks resilience. People who master it don't crumble under setbacks. They use them as springboards. They see rejection as redirection, mistakes as feedback, and roadblocks as signals to explore hidden paths. It's not about blind optimism. It's about strategic perception. When you learn to treat every problem as an opportunity in disguise, life stops feeling like a battlefield and starts looking like a treasure map, full of lessons and hidden doors waiting to be opened. Visualize success in detail. Visualization is more than daydreaming. It's a deliberate mental exercise that shapes your future. When you visualize success in detail, you aren't just imagining something nice to feel better in the moment. You are mentally rehearsing the outcome until your brain begins to believe it's inevitable. The human mind can't always tell the difference between imagination and reality. That's why professional athletes, public speakers, and high achievers across all fields use visualization as a powerful tool. They know that when you picture yourself succeeding vividly, down to the sights, sounds, emotions, and sensations, you program both your mind and body to move toward that reality. Instead of just saying, "I want to succeed," you close your eyes and see yourself standing in that moment. Imagine the exact details, the color of the room, the sound of your name being called, the applause, the handshake, the pride swelling in your chest, and even the relief you feel when the moment arrives. When you do this repeatedly, your brain begins to act as if this outcome has already happened. It builds confidence, lowers fear, and wires your actions to align with the vision. This is why Olympic champions run their race in their minds hundreds of times before stepping onto the track. Their muscles, timing, and breathing have been rehearsed so much that when the real moment comes, it feels familiar. The secret is to be specific and emotionally invested. The more detail you add, the more your brain accepts it as truth. Most people focus on obstacles and doubts, which only reinforces fear. Visualization flips the script by anchoring your focus to success, not failure. When you have lived your victory in your mind 100 times, the real event no longer feels overwhelming. It feels like the next logical step. Fear is replaced with certainty, and uncertainty is repel. Ask, what's the simplest next step? Life often feels overwhelming when you're staring at the big picture. A massive project, a long-term dream, or even just a cluttered to-do list can feel paralyzing. The brain, when faced with too much complexity, doesn't rise to the challenge. It freezes. That's why asking, "What's the simplest next step?" is such a powerful mental reset. This question cuts through the noise, the overthinking, and the endless possibilities, and forces your focus onto one small, clear action you can take right now. It's not about solving everything at once. It's about breaking the paralysis with a single, achievable move forward. The human mind is wired to avoid danger, and when a task feels too big, your survival instincts interpret it as a threat. That's why procrastination, avoidance, and self-doubt creep in. But when you shrink the challenge to the smallest possible action, you bypass fear and re-engage momentum. Writing one sentence can eventually turn into a finished book. Sending one email can spark a new career opportunity. Taking a 5-minute walk can grow into a life-changing fitness routine. The smallest action matters because it's not just about progress. It's about changing your state of mind from stuck to moving. Once motion begins, energy builds, and with energy comes momentum. This question also protects you from the trap of perfectionism. Perfectionism tells you that unless you have the perfect plan, the perfect moment, or the perfect conditions, you can't begin. But the question, what's the simplest next step, destroys that illusion. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need the courage to pull the first thread. And once you pull it, the knot begins to unravel. Over time, you realize that progress doesn't come from giant leaps. It comes from a steady rhythm of small, consistent actions. When life feels overwhelming, break tasks into micro steps. When you face a big goal, whether it's writing a book, starting a business, or transforming your health, it can feel like staring up at a mountain so high you don't even know where to begin. That feeling of being overwhelmed is what keeps most people stuck in hesitation. But the truth is, no mountain is climbed in one leap. It's conquered step by step. Breaking tasks into micro steps is the art of dismantling intimidating goals into actions so small they almost feel laughable. Yet this simplicity is the secret. It's what turns dread into momentum, procrastination into progress, and impossibility into inevitability. The human brain craves completion. Every time you finish even the smallest step, you get a dopamine hit, a little spark of motivation that makes you want to keep going. That's why micro steps are so powerful. They create a chain reaction. Writing a single sentence often turns into a paragraph. Putting on your workout clothes often leads to a full training session. Making one phone call might open the door to an incredibly productive day. When the barrier to entry is so low that you can't justify avoiding it, action becomes natural. Momentum builds slowly at first, but it compounds until what once felt overwhelming starts to feel achievable, even easy. This approach also protects you from the cycle of procrastination and guilt. Normally, you delay a big task because it feels impossible. Then you feel guilty for not doing it, which makes starting even harder. Micro steps break that loop. They give you small wins to celebrate, reshaping how you see yourself. Instead of labeling yourself as someone who can't finish things, you start to believe you're someone who takes action. That identity shift fuels even more action, and over time, the person who once felt stuck begins to see themselves as unstoppable. Think of it this way. Right. Use the 5-minute start trick. Procrastination often has nothing to do with laziness. It's a defense mechanism. Your brain sees a big or uncomfortable task, magnifies its difficulty, and convinces you to delay it. The resistance comes not from the work itself, but from starting. That's why the 5-minute start trick is so effective. It dismantles procrastination by shrinking your commitment to something so small, your brain can't fight it. You tell yourself, I'll just do this for 5 minutes. No pressure to finish, no expectation of brilliance, just 5 minutes of showing up. This trick works because the hardest part of any task is getting past inertia. Once you begin, momentum kicks in, and continuing feels easier than stopping. You might open your laptop just to write a single sentence, and 20 minutes later you're still typing. You might decide to clean for only 5 minutes, and suddenly the whole room is spotless. The brain resists starting far more than it resists continuing. By lowering the barrier to entry, the 5-minute rule bypasses perfectionism, fear, and hesitation. You aren't committing to the whole mountain, only to taking the first step up the path. It also breaks the cycle of self-sabotage caused by perfectionism. Perfectionism whispers that you must produce flawless results, and since that feels impossible, you avoid starting altogether. But when you commit to only 5 minutes, you remove the pressure of excellence. You don't need a masterpiece, you just need movement. Ironically, that tiny, imperfect start often leads to your best work because action generates clarity and momentum in a way that endless planning never will. The beauty of the 5-minute trick is that even if you stop after those 5 minutes, you've still won. You've still built the habit of showing up, you've still made progress, and you've still proven to yourself that resistance can reverse engineer from end goal. Most people approach their goals like wandering through fog. They take random steps forward, hoping that eventually they'll stumble into success. The problem with this approach is that without a clear destination, every step feels uncertain, and uncertainty breeds hesitation. Reverse engineering from the end goal flips this process entirely. Instead of starting from where you are and guessing at the path forward, you begin by vividly picturing the finish line. You define what success looks like in detail, the result achieved, the way it feels, the outcome you desire, and then you mentally walk backward from that point, step by step, until you arrive at the present moment. What once felt unclear now becomes a roadmap dot. This method works because the brain responds differently when it sees a clearly defined target. Ambiguity creates doubt and delay, but a tangible vision creates direction and urgency. If your goal is to publish a book, you don't just think, "I want to be an author." Instead, you imagine holding the finished copy in your hands, then ask, "What happened right before this?" The answer might be submitting the manuscript. Then you ask again, "What happened before that?" Perhaps it was editing the draft. Keep tracing backward, outlining chapters, writing pages, committing to a schedule, until you're back at the very first step. Suddenly, the overwhelming dream has been transformed into a sequence of doable actions, each one leading naturally to the next dot. Reverse engineering also helps you anticipate obstacles before you encounter them. By tracing the path backward, you spot bottlenecks, missing skills, or resource gaps ahead of time. That awareness allows you to prepare in advance rather than scramble under pressure. You move through the journey like a chess player, already thinking 5 moves ahead. Each decision is informed by a clue. Ask better questions. The quality of your life is often shaped not by the answers you have, but by the questions you ask. Most people don't realize how much their inner dialogue determines the direction of their thoughts, their emotions, and ultimately their actions. Shallow questions lead to shallow answers. Negative questions lead to negative outcomes. But when you train yourself to ask better questions, you unlock new possibilities, deeper insights, and solutions you never would have found otherwise. Asking the right question is like turning a key in a locked door. It opens a path forward that was hidden all along. Think about the questions most people default to in times of stress. Why is this happening to me? Or what if I fail? Or why am I not good enough? These questions trap you in victimhood. They reinforce fear, doubt, and helplessness. The brain, being the problem-solving machine it is, will try to answer them, but the answers will only confirm your limitations. Instead of freeing you, these questions lock you in a loop of self-pity and inaction. Now imagine replacing them with better ones. What can I learn from this? Or, how can I make this work? Or, what am I not seeing yet? Immediately your mind shifts gears. It stops closing doors and starts opening them. You're no longer stuck in despair. You're scanning for opportunities. High achievers, innovators, and leaders know this secret. They don't waste time asking questions that limit them. They obsess over empowering questions that expand their vision. An entrepreneur doesn't just ask, "How do I survive this year?" They ask, "How can I triple my results without sacrificing my health or happiness?" A student doesn't ask, "How do I memorize this?" They ask, "How can I teach this so well that someone else understands it easily?" The framing of the question forces the brain to search for better answers, and rehearse difficult conversations. Few things create more stress than the thought of a difficult conversation. Whether it's confronting a friend, negotiating at work, or addressing conflict in a relationship, the stakes feel high, emotions run strong, and the fear of saying the wrong thing can paralyze you. Your heart races, your throat tightens, and your mind floods with what-ifs. That's why rehearsing difficult conversations ahead of time is such a powerful mental strategy. It gives you clarity, control, and confidence before you ever step into the real moment. You're not leaving things to chance. You're training your mind to respond with intention instead of panic. At its core, rehearsal is simply mental practice. You close your eyes and run through the interaction before it happens. You imagine the words you'll use, the tone of your voice, and the body language you'll project. You prepare for their possible reactions, anger, defensiveness, sadness, or silence, and you decide in advance how you'll respond to each. The more vividly you practice, the more natural it feels when the conversation finally takes place. Instead of fumbling for words or getting hijacked by emotions, you enter the room with a sense of calm readiness, as though you've already been there before. This technique works because the brain doesn't fully distinguish between real experience and vividly imagined experience. Athletes use visualization to train their bodies for competition, and negotiators do the same to prepare for high-stakes deals. When you mentally rehearse, you condition both your mind and nervous system. Your voice steadies, your breathing slows, and you're able to think clearly even when emotions rise. You're building a script for your brain to follow so that when the stress hits, you don't collapse into fight or flight. You stay composed and deliberate. It's not just about preparing. Use negative visualization. Most people run from their fears. They avoid thinking about the worst-case scenario because they believe ignoring it will make it less real. But avoidance has the opposite effect. Unacknowledged fears grow larger in the dark, feeding anxiety and paralyzing you when it's time to act. Negative visualization flips that pattern. Instead of pretending fear doesn't exist, you face it directly. You imagine the worst possible outcome in vivid detail, not to terrify yourself, but to strip it of its power. By confronting your fears in your mind, you rob them of the mystery that makes them overwhelming. This practice has ancient roots in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics understood that fear thrives in uncertainty. When your mind doesn't define the threat, it fills the unknown with catastrophic exaggerations. But when you deliberately picture what could go wrong, losing the deal, failing in front of others, being rejected, or even starting over, you begin to see that even if those things happened, you could endure. You would adapt, adjust, and keep moving. What once felt like an unstoppable monster becomes a manageable challenge. Negative visualization has two hidden benefits. The first is preparation. By rehearsing the worst in advance, you build a plan for how to respond. If you imagine losing your job, you also imagine what steps you'd take next, updating your resume, reaching out to contacts, exploring new paths. Suddenly, if it happens, you're not frozen, you're ready. The second benefit is gratitude. When you picture losing what you take for granted, your health, your home, your relationships, you return to the present with renewed appreciation. Anxiety fades because you realize how much you still have right now. The true power of negative visualization lies in the shift it creates in your mindset. Instead of telling yourself, I can't let this happen, you anchor new habits to existing ones. One of the biggest reasons people fail to build new habits is because they rely on willpower alone. They try to force themselves into routines that don't feel natural, and when motivation fades, so does consistency. The truth is, habits are not just about discipline, they are about structure. That's where the strategy of anchoring comes in. Anchoring a new habit to an existing one takes advantage of patterns that are already automatic in your daily life. Instead of trying to carve out entirely new time and space, you simply attach the new behavior to something you already do without thinking. Think of your daily routine as a chain of events. You wake up, brush your teeth, make coffee, check your phone, get dressed. These actions happen almost on autopilot because they've been repeated so many times. Anchoring leverages this automatic flow. If you want to start meditating, don't just tell yourself, I'll meditate every day. Instead, anchor it to brushing your teeth. After I brush my teeth in the morning, I'll sit down for 2 minutes of breathing. If you want to start journaling, attach it to your morning coffee. Once I pour my coffee, I'll open my journal and write 3 lines. By tying the new habit to an existing one, you remove decision-making, which is where most habits fail. This works because the brain thrives on cues. Habits are not random actions. They're triggered behaviors. The sight of your toothbrush cues the act of brushing. The smell of coffee cues sipping. Anchoring creates a reliable cue for your new habit, which over time makes it automatic. The habit is no longer something you're forcing. It becomes something that naturally follows what you already do. It's like hitching a new train car to one that's already moving. The momentum carries it forward effortlessly. Anchoring also builds consistency without overwhelming. Apply Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that work expands to fill the time you give it. If you allow yourself a whole week to finish a task that should only take 2 hours, chances are you'll stretch it out with procrastination, overthinking, and unnecessary details. This happens because your brain doesn't feel urgency, so it wanders, adds complexity, and delays progress. But when you shorten the deadline, everything changes. Suddenly, your mind becomes laser-focused, distractions fade, and you prioritize only what truly matters. A time limit creates pressure, and that pressure sharpens your attention in a way that endless open time never can. Think about the times you've rushed to clean your room just because a guest was about to arrive, or how quickly you can finish a project when a boss asks for it before lunch. That burst of efficiency wasn't magic. It was Parkinson's law in action. You worked faster because you didn't give yourself the luxury of delay. The beauty of this principle is that you can use it on purpose. Instead of waiting for deadlines to come from someone else, set short, self-imposed deadlines for your own tasks. Tell yourself you'll write that email in 10 minutes, finish outlining your video script before your coffee gets cold, or clean your desk in just 15 minutes. You'll be surprised at how much you can get done when the clock is ticking. The trick is not to set impossible deadlines that create panic, but to choose time frames that push you without overwhelming you. This balance forces efficiency and helps you avoid the trap of perfectionism. When you give yourself less time, you stop obsessing over tiny details that don't matter, and you focus on finishing. High achievers often use this principle daily, not because they want to rush through life, but because they know speed plus focus beats endless hesitation. If you learn to shrink your reframe "I have to" into "I get to." Most of us go through our day saying things like, "I have to go to work," "I have to cook dinner," or "I have to take care of the kids." Those three little words, "I have to," sound small, but they carry a heavy feeling of pressure and obligation. They make life feel like a list of chores where you're forced into action against your will. And when your brain hears that phrase repeatedly, it starts associating your daily responsibilities with negativity and resistance. You begin to drag your feet, complain, and feel weighed down. Now here's the mental shift. Replace "I have to" with "I get to." At first it might feel strange, but this tiny change in language flips your entire perspective. Instead of a burden, the same activity turns into a privilege or opportunity. For example, "I get to go to work" reminds you that many people are unemployed or struggling financially, and you have the chance to earn an income. "I get to cook dinner" reframes the task into gratitude that you have food in your kitchen and a family to share it with. "I get to take care of my kids" reminds you that parenthood is a gift, even when it's messy, exhausting, and chaotic. This isn't about pretending everything is perfect or ignoring stress. It's about intentionally choosing gratitude over resentment. The reality of your tasks doesn't change, but the way you feel about them does. That one mental switch changes your energy. Suddenly, you show up lighter, more motivated, and even proud. And people around you can feel it too, in your tone of voice, in your attitude, and in your presence. Instead of moving through life as if you're chained to endless obligations, you begin to carry yourself as someone who sees value in what you do each day. Here's a powerful way to test it. The next time you catch yourself saying "I have to," pause and swap it for "I get to." Gamify boring tasks. We all have tasks that feel boring, repetitive, or downright draining. Folding laundry, replying to endless emails, organizing files, or cleaning the house. These are the kinds of things that don't feel exciting, but still need to get done. And because they're so dull, our brain resists starting them. We procrastinate, we delay, and sometimes we even waste more energy avoiding the task than it would take to just finish it. The secret to breaking this cycle is to gamify those boring tasks. In other words, to turn them into a challenge, a competition, or a game that makes them fun. When you gamify a task, you're not changing the work itself. Laundry is still laundry, but you are changing the way your brain experiences it. Our minds are wired to crave progress, rewards, and achievement. That's why video games are so addictive. They constantly give you points, levels, and little wins. By applying the same principle to daily life, you can hack your brain into enjoying things you'd normally avoid. For example, folding laundry can become a race against the clock. Can I finish before this song ends? Cleaning your desk can be a personal challenge. Can I beat yesterday's cleaning time? Writing a report can turn into a points system. Every page I complete earns me 5 points toward a reward at the end. The magic of gamification is that it provides immediate gratification in situations that usually only offer delayed rewards. Normally, you don't feel much satisfaction until the laundry pile is completely gone or the house is spotless. But when you gamify the task, you feel progress instantly, even in small steps. And your brain loves that feeling. It releases dopamine, the feel-good chemical that motivates you to keep going. Before you know it, you're actually engaged in the task instead of dreading it. Gamification also fuels competition, sometimes with yourself, sometimes with others. You can challenge a friend or family member to see who finishes faster, or you can track streaks and try to beat your own record. Even something as simple as keeping score in your notebook can turn boring routines into little victories. Over time, your brain starts to link those tasks with a sense of satisfaction rather than boredom. What used to feel like drudgery becomes a challenge you're eager to win. The best part is that gamification builds momentum. Once you experience how effective it is for small tasks, you'll want to apply it to bigger ones too. Suddenly, working on long projects, studying, or exercising can all feel more engaging because you're treating them like a game instead of a burden. The task itself doesn't change, but your relationship with it does. And that shift is often the difference between procrastination and progress. So the next time you're staring at a task you don't want to do, don't ask, "How can I force myself to do this?" Instead ask, "How can I turn this into a game?" Add rules, set timers, give yourself points, or create streaks. The more playful you make it, the less your brain will resist it. And when you learn to gamify your boring tasks, you'll find yourself not only finishing them faster, but actually enjoying the process. Think in probabilities, not absolutes. Most people see life in black and white terms. Success or failure, win or lose, right or wrong. This way of thinking feels simple and comforting because it gives us clear answers. But the truth is, the world doesn't work in absolutes. It works in probabilities. Every decision we make, every action we take, carries a range of possible outcomes with different chances of happening. When you learn to think in probabilities instead of absolutes, you free yourself from rigid all-or-nothing thinking, and you start approaching life with flexibility, strategy, and clarity. Imagine you're investing money in the stock market. Most beginners ask, will this stock go up or down? That's an absolute question. A better way is to ask, what are the chances this stock will go up in the next 6 months? And what factors increase those chances? That simple shift in perspective makes your decisions smarter. You're no longer hoping for certainty. You're weighing odds. This is exactly how top investors, poker players, and world-class strategists think. They don't try to be right 100% of the time. Instead, they aim to tilt the odds in their favor repeatedly, knowing that over the long run, small advantages compound into massive wins. Thinking in probabilities also changes your relationship with failure. When you think in absolutes, failure feels like a verdict. I was wrong, I lost, I'm not good enough. But when you see outcomes as probabilities, missing a goal isn't devastating. It's just part of the numbers game. For example, if something had a 70% chance of success, that means it also had a 30% chance of failure. If the failure happens, it doesn't mean you made a bad choice. It just means the less likely outcome occurred this time. By seeing it this way, you can keep your confidence, learn, and move forward without beating yourself up. This mindset also forces you to gather better information. When you stop asking, will this work? And instead ask, how likely is this to work? And how can I increase the odds? You begin to think like a scientist. You look at data, test small experiments, and adjust your strategy instead of gambling everything on one fixed belief. It opens your mind to alternatives, backup plans, and creative solutions you would never have considered if you were stuck in absolute thinking. Another benefit is that probabilities make you more resilient in uncertain situations. Life is unpredictable. Jobs change, markets crash, relationships shift. If you think only in absolutes, every curveball feels like a disaster. But when you already expect a range of possibilities, nothing shocks you. You're ready to adapt because you've already considered different outcomes in advance. That flexibility gives you an edge in both business and personal life. So, how can you practice this? Start by replacing black and white questions with probability-based ones. Instead of asking, will I succeed? Ask, what's the likelihood I'll succeed if I take this step? Instead of asking, is this decision right or wrong? Ask, how likely is this path to bring the results I want compared to other options? And most importantly, stop chasing perfection. Aim to make more high-probability decisions over time, knowing some won't work out, but the overall pattern will move you forward. When you train yourself to think in probabilities, you stop fearing failure, you stop demanding certainty, and you start making choices that are smarter, more strategic, and more aligned with reality. Life stops being a game of gambling on one big outcome and becomes a long-term strategy where you keep stacking the odds in your favor. That's how you move through chaos with confidence. Just like a chess player who can already see 10 moves ahead. Focus on systems, not just goals. Most people live their lives chasing goals. They say things like, my goal is to lose 20 pounds. My goal is to save 10,000. Or, my goal is to write a book. Goals are important because they give you direction, but the problem is that goals alone don't guarantee success. A goal is just a destination. It tells you where you want to go. What really determines whether you get there is the system you put in place. A system is the daily routine, the habits, the process you follow that naturally moves you toward the outcome. If you focus only on the goal, you'll feel like you're always not there yet. But if you focus on the system, progress happens automatically. Think of it like this. If your goal is to run a marathon, the system is running 4 times a week, increasing your distance gradually and fueling your body properly. If your goal is to grow a YouTube channel, the system is creating content on a schedule, engaging with your audience, and improving your videos step by step. If your goal is to get fit, the system is showing up at the gym every morning, eating balanced meals, and tracking your progress. Goals are results. Systems are behaviors. And it's the behaviors, done consistently, that lead to real transformation. The biggest problem with focusing only on goals is that they create a constant sense of lack. Until you achieve the goal, you feel like you're failing. For example, if your goal is to write a book, every day you haven't finished it feels like a loss. But if your system is to write 500 words a day, then every day you hit that target is a win. That simple shift turns frustration into momentum, because now you're celebrating progress instead of waiting for one big finish line. Systems also protect you from relying on motivation, which comes and goes. Motivation might get you started, but it won't carry you through weeks, months, or years of work. Systems, on the other hand, run on discipline and structure. Once a system is in place, you don't waste energy deciding what to do each day. You just follow the plan. And because systems create habits, they eventually become automatic. You no longer have to force yourself. It becomes part of who you are. Here's the best part. When your systems are strong, goals almost become inevitable. If you set up a system of exercising and eating well, weight loss or strength gain is unavoidable. If you build a system of saving and budgeting, financial stability naturally follows. If you stick to a system of content creation, growth will come. You don't have to obsess about the outcome because the process takes care of it. So, instead of asking, "What's my goal?" try asking, "What system will get me there?" Break the big result into daily actions you can repeat consistently. Track your habits, not just your milestones. Celebrate sticking to the system, not just hitting the target. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. The goal becomes less important than the identity you build through the system. You're no longer just someone chasing success. You're someone living the habits that create it. That's the real magic. Goals can inspire you, but systems transform you. If you design the right systems and commit to them, you won't just achieve one goal. You'll build a lifestyle where success becomes the natural byproduct of who you are and what you do every single day. Keep a done list. Most people are familiar with the classic to-do list. It's where you write down everything you need to accomplish in a day, a week, or even a month. While useful, there's a hidden problem with to-do lists. They constantly remind you of what you haven't finished yet. Even if you check off 10 tasks, your brain zooms in on the 1 or 2 things you didn't do. That creates stress, guilt, and a sense of falling behind. The done list flips this mindset completely. Instead of only tracking what you need to do, you also record everything you have already completed. It's a simple practice, but it builds momentum, motivation, and confidence like nothing else. Think about it. Every time you finish a task, sending an email, completing a workout, writing a paragraph, you usually just move straight to the next thing without giving yourself credit. Over time, this creates what I call the invisible progress trap, where you're working hard but still feel like you're not moving forward. A done list makes your progress visible. By writing down what you've already accomplished, you give your brain a tangible sense of achievement. This triggers a dopamine release, the same chemical that makes winning a game or leveling up so addictive. That little boost of satisfaction pushes you to keep going. The done list also rewires your self-image. Many people secretly see themselves as procrastinators or as someone who never finishes things. But when you look back at a growing list of completed tasks, no matter how small, you start building a new identity, someone who takes consistent action. And identity is powerful. Once you believe you're someone who gets things done, your behavior naturally aligns with that belief. Another benefit of a done list is that it helps you fight perfectionism. Perfectionists often dismiss small wins because they don't feel like enough. But wise. And you track every little action, like brainstorming for 10 minutes, making a phone call, or tidying up your workspace. You begin to see how those micro-actions stack up into major progress over time. It shifts your focus from, I didn't do everything, to, I've already done so much, and I'm still moving forward. Here's how to start. At the end of each day, take 2 minutes to write down everything you accomplished, no matter how minor it seems. This could be tasks from your to-do list or even unexpected wins that came up during the day. Over time, you'll build a record of your progress that becomes incredibly motivating to look back on. On days when you feel stuck or unproductive, flipping through your done list reminds you that you're capable, consistent, and making progress even when it doesn't feel that way. The done list doesn't replace the to-do list. It complements it. One keeps you organized about what's ahead, the other fuels your motivation by celebrating what's behind. Together, they create a loop of clarity and momentum. You always know where you're going, but you also never forget how far you have already come. And that balance can be the difference between giving up and staying consistent until you reach your biggest goals. So don't just ask, what do I need to do? Also ask, what have I already done? Because sometimes the fastest way to move forward is to pause and recognize the progress you've already made. Practice active recall. When most people try to learn something new, they rely on passive methods. They reread their notes, highlight sections in a book, or watch the same video lecture over and over again. The problem is that these methods make you feel like you're learning, but they don't actually help the information stick. That's why so many students can spend hours studying and still forget everything when the test comes. The real key to powerful learning is something called active recall. Active recall means forcing your brain to pull information out of memory instead of just reviewing it. It's the difference between reading the answer on the page and closing the book to see if you can explain it from memory. That active retrieval strengthens your neural pathways, just like lifting weights strengthens your muscles. Every time you recall information without looking, you're telling your brain, this is important, keep it accessible. Here's an example. Let's say you're trying to learn about history. Instead of reading a chapter 3 times, read it once, close the book, and then try to explain the main points in your own words. You'll quickly notice what you actually understood versus what you only recognized. That struggle to remember is the magic. It's what makes the knowledge stick. And when you do check your notes, you can immediately see your weak spots and focus your energy there, instead of wasting time reviewing what you already know. Active recall works for anything. Studying for exams, learning a new skill, memorizing speeches, or even remembering people's names. The principle is always the same. Don't just passively consume information. Challenge your brain to reproduce it. You can use flashcards, quizzes, teaching someone else, or simply writing down everything you remember about a topic without looking at your notes. The harder your brain works to retrieve the knowledge, the stronger it becomes. Another huge benefit of active recall is that it reveals gaps in your understanding. Passive studying tricks you into thinking you get it because the information looks familiar. But familiarity is not mastery. With active recall, you can't fake it. If you can't explain it, you don't really know it. And once you see those gaps, you know exactly where to put your effort next. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where every recall attempt makes you sharper and more confident. It may feel uncomfortable at first because your brain loves the ease of rereading over the challenge of remembering. But remember this, growth lives in the struggle. If it feels a little difficult, it means it's working. Just like muscles grow when they're pushed, your memory strengthens when it's tested. So next time you're learning, don't just highlight and hope. Close the book, put away the notes, and test yourself. Practice recalling, practice explaining, and practice struggling a little. Over time, you will find that the knowledge doesn't just fade away. It becomes part of your mental reflexes, ready to be used whenever you need it. That's the difference between knowing something for a day and owning it for life. Teach it to learn it. One of the fastest ways to truly master something is to teach it to someone else. This might sound strange at first. After all, don't you need to fully understand a topic before you can teach it? The truth is actually the opposite. Teaching forces you to organize, simplify, and explain what you know, and that process makes the knowledge stick far deeper than simply studying it on your own. Think about when you've tried to explain something complicated to a friend. Suddenly, you realize which parts you understand clearly and which parts you're fuzzy on. That's because teaching exposes the gaps in your knowledge. When you stumble, It's a signal that you need to go back and strengthen that area. On the flip side, when you can explain an idea simply and confidently, it proves that you really own it. Students learn passively, but teachers learn actively. The act of teaching engages multiple parts of your brain at once. First, you have to recall the information from memory. Then, you have to translate it into your own words instead of just repeating what you've read. Finally, you have to deliver it in a way someone else can understand, whether that's through speaking, writing, or even drawing it out. This combination strengthens the neural pathways connected to that knowledge, making it far more durable and accessible in the future. And here's the best part. You don't need an official classroom or an audience to use this method. You can teach in simple, everyday ways. Try explaining a concept to a friend over coffee. Write a blog post or a social media thread about what you learned today. Record a short video, or even just talk out loud to yourself as if you were teaching an invisible student. The point isn't to be perfect. It's to force your brain to actively process the material until it becomes second nature. Over time, teaching also changes your identity. Instead of just being someone who knows a little about a subject, you become someone who can explain it, persuade others with it, and apply it in real life. That confidence sticks with you. And in today's world, where information is everywhere but true understanding is rare, the ability to teach clearly is a superpower. So the next time you're learning something new, don't just keep it in your notebook. Share it, explain it, teach it. Even if you feel like a beginner, act like a teacher, because every time you teach, you're not just helping others learn, you're cementing the knowledge inside yourself. That's how you move from "I've heard this" to "I live this." Right before feeling ready. Most people believe they need to be fully prepared before they start writing. They wait for the perfect idea, the perfect plan, or the perfect sentence to magically appear before putting words on paper. The problem is that this mindset creates endless delays. You sit in front of the blank page, overthinking and doubting yourself, waiting for clarity to arrive. But here's the truth. Clarity doesn't come before you write. It comes because you write. Writing before you feel ready is like turning on a faucet. At first, the water might come out muddy or uneven, but the longer you let it flow, the clearer it gets. In the same way, your first words might feel messy, scattered, or incomplete. But as you keep writing, your brain starts connecting ideas, forming patterns, and uncovering insights you didn't even know were hiding inside you. Waiting for perfection kills creativity. Starting messy creates momentum. Think about it. Some of the best ideas you've ever had probably didn't show up fully formed in your head. They emerged while you were already working, during a conversation, while sketching something out, or while jotting down notes. That's because the act of creating sparks new thoughts. Your brain reacts to what you have already written, and those reactions guide you to your next sentence, your next idea, your next breakthrough. The biggest enemy here is perfectionism. We imagine that writing should be clean and polished from the very beginning. But a blank page isn't a stage for finished work. It's a workbench. It's where you shape, mold, and refine raw material. When you give yourself permission to write badly at first, you free yourself from the pressure that holds most people back. The truth is, you can't edit a blank page. But once words are down, even imperfect ones, you have something to work with, and that's how greatness is born. His principle doesn't apply only to writing books or essays. It applies to anything creative. Scripts, business ideas, speeches, or even journaling. The goal isn't to get it right the first time. The goal is to get it out. Once it's out, you can polish, restructure, and improve. But if you never start, you never give yourself that chance. So here's a practical tip. The next time you feel stuck, tell yourself you'll just write for 5 minutes without judging what comes out. Let it be messy. Let it be imperfect. Let it be incomplete. Often those first 5 minutes are all it takes to break through the resistance. By the end, you'll usually find yourself writing far longer because momentum has taken over. When you write before you feel ready, you learn a powerful truth. Readiness is not a starting point. It's a result. The act of writing makes you ready. And once you understand that, you'll never again sit frozen in front of a blank page. Instead, you'll start writing, knowing that the words will lead you to the clarity you were waiting for all along. Focus on high-leverage activities. Most of us fill our days with tasks that keep us busy but don't actually move us forward. We check emails, attend endless meetings, shuffle papers, scroll through notifications, or spend hours on chores that don't really change anything in our lives. These are low-leverage activities. They take up time and energy but produce very little impact. The real secret to massive progress is learning to focus on high-leverage activities, the small set of actions that create disproportionately large results. A high-leverage activity is something that, once completed, makes everything else easier or even unnecessary. For example, let's say you run a business. Spending hours on minor design tweaks is low leverage, but creating a system that automates customer responses is high leverage, because once it's built, it saves you time over and over again. Or think about fitness. Rearranging your workout playlist is low leverage. Building a consistent habit of exercising 3 times a week is high leverage because it compounds into long-term health. The challenge is that high-leverage work often feels uncomfortable. It requires deep focus, creativity, and sometimes risk. Writing a book, pitching a big client, creating a new product, or starting a podcast might scare you more than answering a few easy emails. That's why so many people hide in low-leverage tasks. They give the illusion of productivity, but at the end of the day, nothing significant has changed. Here's how to identify high-leverage activities. Ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do today that will create results not just once, but repeatedly in the future? Another question is, if I stopped doing this task forever, would it really matter? If the answer is no, it's probably low leverage. If the answer is yes, or if it creates ripple effects far beyond the initial effort, then it's worth prioritizing. Focusing on high-leverage activities also teaches you to value quality over quantity. 10 small, shallow tasks may feel satisfying to check off, but one high-leverage action can outweigh them all. For example, having one strategic conversation with the right mentor could open doors that months of busy work never could. Recording one great video can reach thousands, while hours of behind-the-scenes tinkering might reach no one. The key is discipline. Your brain naturally craves the instant gratification of easy wins. But if you can train yourself to measure progress, not by how many things you check off, but by the impact of the things you do, you'll start moving toward exponential results. This is why top performers seem to get so much done with the same 24 hours we all have. It's not that they're busier, it's that they spend most of their energy on the few activities that actually matter. So the next time you plan your day, don't just ask, what needs to be done? Ask, what's the highest leverage thing I could do right now? Prioritize those tasks. Do them first. Protect your energy for them. Because once you master the art of focusing on high-leverage activities, you'll stop living in constant busyness and start living in consistent breakthroughs. Apply the 80-20 rule ruthlessly. There's a powerful principle that explains why some people seem to achieve so much with less effort, while others stay stuck working hard but seeing little progress. It's called the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle. The idea is simple. In almost any area of life, 80% of the results come from just 20% of the actions. That means most of what you do every day contributes very little to your success, while a small handful of activities produce the majority of your outcomes. The key is to identify those high-impact activities, and then double down on them while cutting out the rest. Look at your work, for example. Chances are most of your revenue, recognition, or career growth comes from a few specific actions. Maybe it's reaching out to clients, delivering presentations, or creating new products. The rest, endless emails, minor meetings, or busy paperwork, doesn't really move the needle. Or consider relationships. Often just a few deep connections provide 80% of your joy and fulfillment, while casual or toxic ones drain your energy without adding much value. Even in fitness, 20% of your habits, like consistent workouts and healthy eating, deliver most of the results, while tiny details like the perfect protein timing or the latest supplements barely matter. Here's the problem. Most people don't apply the 80-20 rule ruthlessly. They nod their heads, agree with the concept, but then go right back to spending 80% of their time on low-value tasks. Why? Because those small tasks feel comfortable. They're easy wins. They don't require risk, courage, or creativity. But if you want to grow fast, you have to be willing to cut out the noise and spend the majority of your energy where it really counts. Applying the 80-20 rule ruthlessly means asking tough questions. What 20% of my actions are giving me the most results? What 80% could I eliminate, delegate, or minimize without truly hurting my progress? It also means being brutally honest about distractions disguised as productivity. For instance, perfecting a design when it's already good enough might feel productive, but it's likely part of the unimportant 80%. On the other hand, making a sales call or recording a video that could reach thousands sits firmly in the impactful 20%. When you live this way, you begin to notice something incredible. You don't need to do everything to succeed. You just need to focus on the right things. By cutting away the low-value 80%, you free up time, energy, and mental space to put into the high-value 20%. And over time, those few actions compound, giving you far greater results than trying to do it all. This principle isn't about working harder. It's about working smarter. It's about realizing that your resources are limited, so you can't afford to waste them on things that don't matter. Once you apply the 80-20 rule ruthlessly, your days become lighter, your decisions become clearer, and your results become bigger. You stop being busy and start being effective. So instead of asking, how can I do more, start asking, which few things matter most? Then cut away the rest with no guilt. That's how you shift from average progress to exponential growth. Keep a decision journal. Every day, you make countless decisions, some small, like what to eat for lunch, and some huge, like whether to change jobs, invest money, or start a business. Most people make these choices, move on, and never look back. But here's the problem. If you don't track your decisions, you never really learn from them. You don't see the patterns in your thinking, you don't notice your blind spots, and you don't build the wisdom that could make your future choices better. That's why keeping a decision journal is such a powerful tool. A decision journal is exactly what it sounds like, a place where you record important choices before you know the outcome. The key is not to wait until things are over and then write about what happened. By then, hindsight bias takes over and you convince yourself you knew it all along. Instead, you capture your thoughts in the moment. What you decided, why you decided it, what information you had, and what you expected would happen. Later, when the results come in, you can compare reality with your reasoning. That's how you spot where your thinking was strong and where it led you astray. For example, let's say you're thinking about switching careers. In your decision journal, you'd write down questions like, why am I considering this? What risks am I seeing? What do I expect will happen in 6 months, a year, or 5 years if I take this path? Fast forward 6 months. You can look back and see how accurate your predictions were. Did you underestimate the stress? Did you overestimate the money? Did you ignore some red flags? This reflection sharpens your judgment far more than just moving on and hoping for the best next time. The value of a decision journal isn't only in big life choices. It also helps in business, health, or personal projects. If you launch a new product, record why you believed customers would love. Schedule thinking time. Most of us live in constant motion. We wake up, check our phones, rush through tasks, bounce from meeting to meeting, answer emails, handle errands, scroll through notifications, and by the end of the day, we collapse into bed, exhausted. But here's the problem. Being busy isn't the same as being effective. If you never stop to think, to reflect, or to zoom out, you end up reacting to life instead of directing it. That's why scheduling thinking time is one of the most underrated productivity habits you can adopt. Thinking time is exactly what it sounds like. Time set aside just to think, not to check your phone, not to multitask, not to react. Pure, focused space where you ask yourself important questions and give your brain the quiet it needs to generate solutions. Some of the most successful leaders in history, from Einstein to Bill Gates to Warren Buffett, have credited their breakthroughs not to endless work, but to making room for deep, uninterrupted thought. Why is this so powerful? Because most problems don't get solved by working harder. They get solved by thinking smarter. Imagine you're struggling with your workload. You could grind through another 10-hour day, or you could spend 1 hour thinking about how to automate, delegate, or simplify. That 1 hour of thought could save you dozens of hours in the future. The return on investment is massive. The trouble is, thinking rarely feels urgent. No one is emailing you saying, hey, make sure you reflect today. Urgent tasks scream for your attention, while deep thought quietly waits. That's why you have to treat thinking time like a real appointment. Put it on your calendar, protect it. Even 30 minutes once or twice a week can make a huge difference. Here's a simple way to do it. Block off a time slot, grab a notebook, and write down a powerful question to guide your thinking. For X. Use if-then planning. Have you ever set a goal, felt motivated at the start, and then slowly drifted off track? Maybe you wanted to exercise more, eat healthier, or spend less time on your phone, but life got busy and your plans fell apart. The problem isn't always motivation. Often it's simply a lack of strategy. That's where if-then planning comes in. It's one of the simplest but most powerful tools for building consistency in your habits. If dash, then planning works like this. Instead of vaguely telling yourself, I'll exercise more, you create a clear plan that connects a specific situation to a specific action. For example, if it's 7 a.m., then I will go for a 20-minute jog. Or, if I feel the urge to check social media while working, then I'll take 3 deep breaths and refocus. It's a mental shortcut that turns intentions into automatic behaviors. Why does this work so well? Because most goals fail when we rely on willpower in the moment. You think, should I go to the gym today or skip it? That tiny debate eats up energy, and eventually, your tired brain chooses the easier option. But with if-then planning, the decision has already been made in advance. There's no debate. The situation acts as a trigger, and your brain knows exactly what to do. It removes guesswork and makes the behavior automatic. Psychologists call this an implementation intention, and research shows it dramatically increases the chances of following through. In one study, people who used if-then planning to schedule exercise were 2 to 3 times more likely to stick with it than those who didn't. Why? Because the brain loves clarity. When you give it a simple rule like, if X happens, then I do Y, it doesn't waste time or energy hesitating. If dash, then planning is incredibly flexible. You can use it to build good habits. If it's after dinner, then I'll write in my journal for 10 minutes. Stack habits for growth. Most people struggle to build new habits because they try to start from scratch. They say things like, I'll start meditating every morning, or I'll go for a run after work. But then they forget, lose motivation, or get thrown off by their routine. The truth is, building a habit in isolation is hard, but there's a smarter way: stacking habits. This method takes the routines you already do every day and uses them as anchors for new habits, making growth easier, faster, and more natural. Habit stacking works on a simple principle. Your brain loves patterns. Once a behavior is automatic, like brushing your teeth, making coffee, or checking your phone, it doesn't take effort anymore. You can use those automatic actions as triggers for the new behaviors you want to build. For example, after I brush my teeth, I will floss 1 tooth. Or, after I pour my morning coffee, I will write down 3 things I'm grateful for. By linking the new habit to something that's already wired into your brain, you dramatically increase the chances that it will stick. The beauty of habit stacking is that it removes friction. You don't have to carve out special time or remember on your own. The existing habit becomes a reminder. Over time, the new behavior becomes just as automatic as the old one. Think about it. You don't forget to brush your teeth because it's part of your routine. Imagine if journaling, exercising, or reading could feel that automatic. That's exactly what stacking makes possible. You can use habit stacking for growth in any area of life. Want to improve your health? After I put on my work shoes, I'll do 10 squats. Want to learn more? After I open my laptop, I'll read 1 page of a book before I start working. Want to build better relationships? After I sit down for dinner, I'll share 1 positive thing that happened today. Each stack. Use deadlines as creative constraints. Most people think of deadlines as stressful. They picture the ticking clock, the pressure, the last-minute scramble, and the feeling of racing against time. But here's the truth. Deadlines don't just create stress, they create focus. Without deadlines, projects drag on forever, ideas stay in your head, and perfectionism takes over. When you use deadlines as creative constraints, you transform them from something you fear into a tool that helps you finish, focus, and produce your best work. Think about the last time you had a real deadline. Maybe a school assignment, a work project, or a presentation. You might have procrastinated at first, but when the deadline got close, suddenly you found energy and clarity you didn't know you had. That's because deadlines narrow your focus. They eliminate endless options and force you to make decisions. Instead of getting lost in what-ifs, you zero in on what must be done now. That pressure, when used correctly, is not your enemy. It's your creative ally. Deadlines also fight one of the biggest killers of progress: perfectionism. Without a deadline, you'll keep tweaking, adjusting, and polishing forever. But when you give yourself a clear time limit, you don't have the luxury of endless revisions. You're forced to prioritize the essentials, the ideas, the moves, the content that truly matter. Paradoxically, this often leads to better results. Why? Because creativity loves constraints. When your time is limited, your brain stops overthinking and starts problem-solving. You can use this intentionally, even outside of external deadlines. For example, instead of saying, "I'll write when I feel inspired," say, "I'll write a draft in the next 45 minutes. Instead of, "I'll launch this project someday," say, "I'll publish a rough version by Friday." These self-imposed deadlines create urgency. Break patterns to spark ideas. Creativity doesn't thrive in repetition. It thrives in disruption. When you follow the exact same routines, think in the same ways, and surround yourself with the same inputs, your brain gets stuck in a loop. You keep recycling the same ideas instead of generating new ones. That's why one of the most powerful ways to spark creativity is to break your patterns. By shaking up your environment, your habits, and your perspective, you jolt your brain out of autopilot and into fresh thinking. Think about it. How many times have you had your best ideas while traveling, walking in a new place, or meeting someone outside your usual circle? That's not a coincidence. When your brain encounters something unfamiliar, it has to work harder to make sense of it. That extra effort creates new connections, and those connections often lead to breakthroughs. In contrast, when everything is predictable, your brain runs on default mode. Efficient, yes, but not very creative. Breaking patterns can be simple. If you always work at your desk, try working in a cafe, library, or park. If you usually write in the morning, experiment with writing at night. If you always brainstorm on a computer, try using pen and paper. Even small shifts in environment or process can unlock new perspectives. The novelty forces your brain to pay attention instead of coasting through familiar grooves. Another way to break patterns is to expose yourself to ideas and people outside your usual world. If you're a writer, study architecture. If you're a business owner, read about psychology. If you're a musician, learn about coding. Creativity often comes from combining concepts from different fields, something you can't do if you only ever consume material from your own niche. Cross-pollination is where innovation thrives. You can also break patterns in your thinking directly. Try brain. Practice opposite thinking. Most of us approach problems in predictable ways. We look for solutions that seem logical, safe, or familiar. But here's the issue. If you only ever think like everyone else, you'll only ever get the same results as everyone else. That's where opposite thinking comes in. It's the practice of flipping your perspective and asking, what if the exact opposite of my first instinct were true? This simple shift can unlock breakthroughs that would never appear if you only stayed on the beaten path. Let's take an example. Imagine you're running a business and sales are low. The common instinct is to ask, how can I sell more? But with opposite thinking, you flip the question, how could I make sure no one buys this product? Suddenly, the answers might be, have a terrible website, ignore customer service, overprice the product, or stop marketing. Now flip those answers again, and you've uncovered obvious but powerful actions to boost sales. Opposite thinking works because it forces your brain out of its comfort zone. When you're stuck, it's usually because you're circling the same limited set of ideas. But when you intentionally look in the opposite direction, you discover blind spots, hidden assumptions, and unconventional solutions. It's like shining a flashlight into corners you normally ignore. You can apply this anywhere. If you're struggling to connect with people, instead of asking, how do I make more friends? Ask, what would I do if I wanted to push people away? Then avoid those behaviors. If you're stuck in creative work, instead of asking, how do I make this perfect? Ask, what if I made it deliberately messy or unfinished? That might spark new styles or approaches. If you're stressed, instead of asking, how do I get rid of stress? Ask, what if stress is useful? Suddenly, stress transforms from an enemy to a signal. Maybe it. Use environment cues for action. We often think our habits depend on willpower or motivation. We tell ourselves, if I were more disciplined, I'd exercise every day. Or, if I just had more motivation, I'd read more. But here's the truth. Habits are shaped less by willpower and more by environment. Your surroundings act like silent triggers that guide your behavior without you even realizing it. That's why one of the smartest ways to take control of your actions is to design your environment with cues that support the habits you want. Think about it. If a bowl of candy is sitting on your desk, you'll probably grab some without thinking. If your phone is buzzing with notifications, you'll end up scrolling. But if you put a water bottle on your desk instead, you'll drink more water. If you place a book by your bed, you're far more likely to read at night instead of doom scrolling. The environment nudges you, sometimes toward bad habits, sometimes toward good ones. The key is to make the cues for your desired actions obvious and easy, while making cues for bad habits invisible and hard. This is why gyms place weights in clear view, why grocery stores put fruits and vegetables near the entrance, and why streaming apps autoplay the next episode. They all understand that cues shape behavior. You can use the same principle in your own life. Want to work out more? Lay out your workout clothes the night before? Want to play guitar more often? Keep it on a stand in your living room instead of tucked away in a case? Want to write daily? Open your laptop and keep a blank document ready so you see it first thing in the morning. On the flip side, you can design your environment to discourage habits you want to break. If you want to snack less, don't keep junk food in the house. If you want to use your phone less, put it in another room while you work. If you want to watch less TV. Batch similar tasks. One of the biggest drains on productivity isn't the work itself. It's the constant switching between different types of tasks. You write an email, then jump to a meeting, then try to focus on a report, then answer a text, then get back to the report again. Each time you switch, your brain needs time to readjust, and that mental switching cost adds up. That's why one of the smartest strategies for saving time and energy is to batch similar tasks together. Task batching means grouping activities of the same type and doing them in one dedicated block of time instead of spreading them out across the day. For example, instead of checking your email 20 times a day, you set 2 time slots to process all emails at once. Instead of making phone calls randomly, you line them up back to back. Instead of paying bills one by one as they come in, you handle them all on a single day each month. By batching, you cut down on context switching, and your brain can stay in the same mode for longer. Think of it like cooking. If you had to cook one meal every single time you were hungry, you'd spend hours prepping, cooking, and cleaning multiple times a day. But if you meal prep, chopping, cooking, and packaging several meals at once, you save huge amounts of time. Task batching is the same principle, applied to work and life. The benefits go beyond saving time. Batching also improves quality. When you're focused on one type of task, you get into a rhythm. Writing one email is a chore, but writing 10 in a row feels smoother because your brain is already in writing mode. Recording one video might take a while to warm up, but recording several in a single session feels more natural. The consistency makes your output sharper and faster. Another advantage is reduced stress. Scattered tasks create mental clutter. You're always half distracted thinking, I still need... Apply the 2-minute rule. One of the biggest obstacles to productivity isn't the difficulty of tasks. It's the resistance to starting. We overthink, procrastinate, and build small tasks up in our heads until they feel like massive mountains. But here's a simple hack that cuts through all that resistance. The 2-minute rule. The idea is simple. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. If it takes longer, break it down into a version that can be started in 2 minutes. Why does this work so well? Because procrastination thrives on delay. The longer you wait, the harder it feels to begin. But when you shrink the starting point down to just 2 minutes, it becomes impossible to argue with yourself. Writing a book sounds overwhelming, but writing for 2 minutes is easy. Cleaning your house feels huge, but putting one dish in the sink takes almost no effort. Exercising might feel daunting, but doing 2 minutes of stretching, anyone can handle that. The magic is that 2 minutes is just the gateway. Once you start, momentum takes over. You sit down to write for 2 minutes, and often you end up writing for 20. You lace up your shoes for a 2-minute walk, and suddenly you're out the door for a full jog. The rule isn't about limiting yourself. It's about tricking your brain into starting, and starting is the hardest part. The other half of the 2-minute rule is tackling tiny tasks immediately. Think about all the little actions that pile up. Replying to a quick email, sending a text, filing a paper, rinsing a cup, jotting down an idea. Each one takes less than 2 minutes, but when you delay them, they stack into a mental burden that weighs you down. By handling them on the spot, you free yourself from that clutter and keep your mind clear. Here's how to use the 2-minute rule in practice. For small tasks, if it's under 2 minutes, don't write it on a to-do list. Just do it now. For big goals, break them down into 2-minute starters. Don't aim to write a novel. Aim to open a document and write 1 sentence. Don't aim to get in shape. Aim to put on your workout clothes. These tiny openings get the ball rolling. This rule is especially powerful for people who struggle with procrastination. Your brain often avoids tasks not because they're hard, but because they feel too big or undefined. By focusing only on the next 2 minutes, you make them approachable. Once you're in motion, the task loses its weight. Over time, the 2-minute rule builds consistency. It turns big goals into daily progress and prevents small tasks from piling up into stress. It works because it aligns with human psychology. We resist big commitments but happily accept small ones. And those small ones, repeated daily, lead to huge outcomes. So the next time you feel stuck, don't tell yourself you need to finish the whole thing. Just ask, what's the 2-minute version of this? Then do it, because once you start, the rest usually takes care of itself. Think in terms of opportunity cost. Every choice you make has a hidden price. It's not just about what you do. It's also about what you don't do because of that choice. This hidden price is called opportunity cost. The concept is simple. Every time you say yes to one thing, you're automatically saying no to something else. And often the thing you're giving up is more valuable than what you're choosing. Most people don't think this way. They only look at the direct cost of an action, how much time, money, or energy it requires. But they ignore what that choice is preventing them from doing instead. For example, let's say you spend 3 hours binge-watching a TV series. The direct cost is just the time you used, but the opportunity cost might be huge. That same 3 hours could have been used to work on a business idea, exercise, learn a new skill, or spend quality time with family. The hidden price tag is what you sacrificed without even realizing it. Here's another example. Imagine you're offered a project at work that pays extra but requires long hours. At first, it seems like a win, more money. But the opportunity cost might be your health, your family time, or the chance to work on a bigger opportunity that could pay off more in the long run. Sometimes the cost of what you miss out on is greater than the benefit of what you gain. Thinking in terms of opportunity cost doesn't mean overanalyzing every decision, but it does mean being intentional. Before committing, ask yourself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Or flip it. If I say no to this, what opportunity am I creating space for? These questions help you see the hidden trade-offs that most people overlook. This mindset is especially powerful for time. Time is the ultimate scarce resource. Once it's spent, you can't get it back. Every hour you give to something unimportant is an hour stolen from something meaningful. That's why high performers are ruthless about where they put their attention. They understand that saying yes to low-value activities means sacrificing high-leverage opportunities. Opportunity cost also applies to money. Spending $50 on takeout isn't just losing $50 today. It's also losing what that money could have grown into if invested over time. This is why financially successful people don't just ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "What am I giving up by spending this instead of investing it?" When you train yourself to see opportunity costs, your decision-making changes. You stop chasing every shiny distraction. You start prioritizing the few actions that create the biggest returns. And you begin to treat your time, energy, and money like the limited, valuable resources they are. So the next time you're about to commit, pause for a moment and ask, what's the opportunity cost here? That single question might save you from wasting years on the wrong things and redirect you toward the choices that truly matter. Apply the 1% daily improvement rule. When people think about success, they often imagine giant leaps, sudden breakthroughs, massive wins, or overnight transformations. But the truth is, real progress rarely happens in huge jumps. It happens in small, steady steps that build on each other over time. That's the power of the 1% daily improvement rule. The idea is simple. If you get just 1% better every single day, the compounding effect will transform your life in ways that seem almost unbelievable. Think about it. 1% feels tiny, almost meaningless. But if you improve by 1% every day for a year, You won't just be 365% better. Thanks to compounding, you will be almost 38 times better than when you started. That's the math of consistent growth. And it works in every area of life: health, business, relationships, learning, and personal development. For example, let's say you want to get in shape. Instead of trying to run 10 miles tomorrow or go on an extreme diet, you start by doing 1 push-up today, 2 tomorrow, and 3 the next. Over time, that small improvement builds into a real habit and real strength. Or imagine you want to grow your wealth. Saving just a little more each week, investing regularly, and learning small money habits compounds into massive results over years. The beauty of the 1% rule is that it makes improvement feel doable. Big goals can be intimidating. They make you think, where do I even start? But when the focus is on just being a little better today than yesterday, the pressure disappears. It shifts your mindset from perfection to progress. And progress is what actually creates momentum. The flip side is also true. If you get 1% worse every day, the decline compounds too. Missing one workout doesn't ruin your fitness, but skipping consistently does. Overspending once doesn't destroy your finances, but repeated small mistakes add up. Time. Compounding works both ways, for you or against you. That's why small choices matter far more than they appear in the moment. To apply the 1% daily improvement rule, ask yourself, what's one tiny upgrade I can make today? It might be reading 1 page of a book, writing 1 sentence, eating 1 healthier meal, or practicing 1 new skill for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be dramatic. The point is consistency, not intensity. Over time, those micro wins stack up until the results look massive from the outside. This approach also builds confidence. Every day you prove to yourself that you're capable of improvement. Each 1% win reinforces your identity. You start to see yourself as someone who grows, learns, and gets better daily. That identity shift is what keeps the momentum alive long after motivation fades. So instead of chasing massive change overnight, commit to small progress every day. Focus on the 1% and trust the compounding effect. Because success isn't about doing everything at once. It's about doing a little bit, consistently, until it becomes unstoppable. Remove one option for faster decisions. We live in a world overflowing with choices. From the moment you wake up, you're faced with decisions. What to wear, what to eat, which task to tackle first, which show to watch, which app to check. At first, having options feels like freedom. But too many options create something psychologists call decision fatigue. The more choices you have to make, the more mentally drained you become, and eventually, you either make poor decisions or avoid deciding altogether. That's why one of the simplest hacks for clarity and speed is this: remove one option. Here's how it works. When you're stuck between too many choices, your brain goes into overdrive, weighing pros and cons, imagining what-ifs, and replaying possible regrets. But when you deliberately take one option off the table, the choice becomes lighter and easier. Instead of wrestling with 10 possible paths, you're now looking at 9, and that small reduction can make a huge difference in your ability to decide. Think about Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, or Barack Obama, all known for wearing the same type of clothes every day. They weren't trying to be boring. They were eliminating one set of daily decisions so they could save their mental energy for bigger things. Or take restaurants with limited menus. Instead of drowning you in endless options, they focus on a few great dishes. You order faster, stress less, and usually enjoy the meal more. You can apply this same principle to your own life. Struggling with what to eat? Narrow it down by eliminating one option that doesn't serve your health. Overwhelmed by career choices? Remove the one that clearly doesn't align with your values. Stuck on what project to start? Cross out the one with the least impact. Every time you remove an option, you reduce the mental load and free yourself to move forward. The power of this strategy isn't just about saving time, it's about protecting your focus. Decision fatigue doesn't just waste minutes, it drains willpower. That's why you can make tough choices at the start of the day, but feel paralyzed by simple ones at night. By cutting down options early, you preserve your energy for the decisions that truly matter. This doesn't mean you have to strip your life of variety or spontaneity. It means being intentional. Instead of trying to keep every door open, Recognize that saying no to one path actually strengthens your yes to another. It clears the fog and gives you momentum. So the next time you're stuck, don't overthink endlessly. Just ask yourself, which option can I eliminate right now? Cross it off, lighten the load, and keep moving. Because faster decisions aren't about knowing everything. They're about simplifying the game so you can keep playing with energy and clarity. Visualize worst case to reduce anxiety. When we face challenges or uncertain situations, our minds often spin with fear. What if this fails? What if I embarrass myself? What if everything goes wrong? That fear can feel overwhelming, and sometimes it stops us from taking action at all. But here's a counterintuitive trick. Instead of running from those fears, face them directly by visualizing the worst-case scenario. Far from making things scarier, this practice actually reduces anxiety and gives you back control. Here's why it works. Anxiety thrives on vagueness. When your fears are undefined, your brain blows them out of proportion. The unknown becomes a monster in the dark. But when you clearly imagine the worst that could realistically happen, you shrink the monster. You see it for what it is, often unpleasant, but rarely as catastrophic as your imagination makes it. Take public speaking as an example. Many people panic at the thought of giving a talk. Their mind jumps to endless what-ifs. But if you stop and ask, what's the actual worst-case scenario, you realize it's probably something like stumbling over words, forgetting a line, or the audience looking bored. Embarrassing? Sure. Life-ending? Definitely not. And once you accept that, the fear loses its grip. This approach, known as negative visualization in Stoic philosophy, isn't about being pessimistic. It's about preparing your mind. By visualizing the worst, you can also plan how to handle it. If you're afraid of starting a business, the worst case might be losing money or having to go back to a regular job. Knowing that, you can take steps to minimize risk, like starting small or keeping savings aside. Suddenly, the fear is no longer paralyzing because you've already rehearsed how to deal with it. The other hidden benefit is gratitude. When you imagine losing something, your health, your job, your fee, freedom, or the people you love, it makes you appreciate those things more in the present. Your worries shrink in perspective, and you realize how much you already have. Of course, you don't want to dwell on the worst case forever. The point isn't to obsess over disaster, but to shine a light on it so it no longer controls you. Once you've faced the fear, the next step is to visualize the best case and the most likely case. This balanced view helps you act with confidence instead of avoidance. So the next time anxiety builds up, don't let it stay in the shadows. Sit down, breathe, and ask yourself, what's the worst that could realistically happen? Picture it clearly, plan for it, and notice how your fear starts to shrink. Because once you face the worst, you realize you can handle it, and that gives you the courage to chase the best. Keep a personal idea bank. Ideas are slippery. They come to you in the shower, during a walk, while driving, or just before you fall asleep. And if you don't capture them, they vanish. How many times have you thought, that's a great idea, I'll remember it later, only to forget it completely an hour later? That's why building a personal idea bank is so powerful. It's a system for collecting and storing your thoughts so they don't disappear, giving you a treasure chest of inspiration you can return to any time. Think of your brain like a leaky bucket. No matter how many ideas you pour in, most of them leak out quickly. An idea bank is the container that stops the leaks. It can be as simple as a notebook, a note-taking app, or even voice memos on your phone. The key isn't the format. It's the habit of capturing ideas immediately before they slip away. The benefit of keeping an idea bank goes beyond memory. It frees your mind from the pressure of holding on to everything. Once you know your ideas are safe, your brain relaxes, and ironically, that creates space for even more creativity. Over time, your idea bank becomes a living archive of your thoughts, insights, and inspirations. Imagine you're a writer facing a blank page. Instead of waiting for inspiration, you open your idea bank and see dozens of notes you jotted down weeks ago. Half-formed thoughts, quotes, questions, observations. Suddenly, the blank page isn't empty anymore. Or imagine you're an entrepreneur brainstorming a new product. Instead of starting from zero, you scroll through your idea bank and find seeds of innovation waiting to be developed. Another hidden advantage is pattern recognition. When you look back at months or years of stored ideas, you start to notice recurring themes. Maybe you've written down multiple notes about time management, or several ideas about fitness, or repeated insights abuse. Out relationships. Those patterns reveal what truly matters to you, and they often point to the projects or goals you should pursue. Building an idea bank also strengthens your creativity muscle. When you commit to recording ideas regularly, you start paying more attention to the world around you. You notice details, connections, and sparks of insight you would normally ignore. Creativity isn't just about inspiration striking randomly, it's about training your brain to collect raw material. Here's a simple way to start. Choose your vault, a notes app, a journal, or even sticky notes. Whenever a thought pops up, no matter how silly or incomplete, write it down. Don't judge it, don't edit it, just capture it. Later, you can review your bank, expand the good ideas, and let the weak ones go. Over time, your bank becomes a well of creativity you can dip into whenever you need. The truth is, the world doesn't lack ideas. It lacks systems for saving and acting on them. By keeping a personal idea bank, you make sure your insights aren't wasted. You give yourself a constant supply of inspiration, and you train your brain to see possibilities everywhere. So don't let your best thoughts slip away. Start your idea bank today and watch it grow into one of your most valuable creative tools. Avoid sunk cost fallacy. One of the biggest traps in decision-making is something called the sunk cost fallacy. It's the tendency to keep investing time, money, or energy into something just because you've already invested a lot, even if it's no longer serving you. We tell ourselves, I can't quit now, I've come too far, or I've already spent so much on this, I have to keep going. But in reality, clinging to sunk costs often leads to wasted years, wasted energy, and missed opportunities. Here's an example. Imagine you've bought an expensive ticket to a concert. On the day of the event, you're sick and exhausted, but you force yourself to go because you don't want the ticket to go to waste. But the money is already gone, whether you go or not. By going, you're actually making yourself suffer more. That's the sunk cost fallacy in action. It shows up in bigger areas too. People stay in careers they hate because they've already spent years in that field. Couples stay in toxic relationships because they've invested too much time to walk away. Businesses keep funding failing projects because they've already poured millions into them. In each case, the past investment clouds judgment, and the person continues down a path that no longer makes sense. The truth is, sunk costs are gone. They can't be recovered. The only thing that matters is this. What's the best decision moving forward? Not, what have I already invested, but what will give me the best return from this point on? That's the question that leads to better choices. To avoid the sunk cost fallacy, train yourself to think like an investor. Smart investors don't cling to losing stocks just because they've bought in. They ask, if I didn't own this today, would I buy it now? If the answer is no, they cut their losses and move on. You can apply the same logic to your life. If you weren't already in this job, would you choose it today? If you weren't already in this relationship, would you start it today? If you hadn't already started this project, would you still pursue it now? If the answer is no, it's a sign you may be stuck in sunk cost thinking. Walking away doesn't mean failure. It means freeing up your time, energy, and money for opportunities that actually move you forward. It's not about disrespecting your past effort. It's about respecting your future potential. Every moment you stay stuck in the wrong place is a moment you could have invested in the right one. So the next time you find yourself thinking, but I've already invested too much to stop now, pause. Remind yourself, the past is gone. The only question that matters is what choice will create the best future. Don't let sunk costs chain you down. Cut the rope and move towards something better. Speak in stories for persuasion. Facts inform, but stories persuade. Think about it. When someone throws a list of statistics or logical points at you, you might understand the message, but it doesn't always stick. But when they tell you a story, a personal struggle, a vivid example, or a relatable journey, suddenly you lean in, you remember it, you feel it. That's the power of speaking in stories. If you want to influence, inspire, or connect deeply with people, you need to wrap your ideas inside narratives. Why does this work so well? Because human beings are wired for stories. Long before we had books or lectures, people passed down knowledge through storytelling. Our brains are literally built to remember stories better than raw data. When you hear a story, your mind doesn't just process the words. It simulates the experience. If someone tells you about climbing a mountain in the freezing cold, you feel the shiver. If they describe the joy of achieving a dream, you share in their excitement. Stories bypass logic and speak directly to emotion, and emotion is what drives action. Let's take an example. Suppose you want to persuade someone to donate to a cause. If you show them statistics like, over 1 million people are affected by this issue, it might sound important, but it feels distant. Now imagine instead you tell the story of one person, their struggles, their challenges, their small victories. Suddenly, the problem has a face, and the listener feels emotionally connected. That connection is what moves people to act. The good news is, you don't need to be a professional storyteller to use this skill. All you need is structure. Most great stories follow a simple pattern: a character, a challenge, and a change. Start with someone relatable, the character. Show the struggle they faced, the challenge. Then share how they overcame it, or what they learned, the change. This simple arc makes your message not only easy to follow, but also memorable. You can apply this everywhere. Want to motivate your team? Instead of giving a lecture about hard work, tell a story about a time you failed, but kept going, and what it taught you. Want to sell a product? Share the story of how it solved a real person's problem. Want to teach something complex? Wrap it inside a story so people can see it in action instead of abstract theory. Stories also build trust. When you share your own experiences, your struggles, your doubts, your lessons, people see your humanity. They connect with you, not just your message. That authenticity makes your words far more persuasive than polished arguments alone. So the next time you want to influence or inspire, don't just list facts. Tell a story. Make people see, hear, and feel the journey. Because while logic might win debates, it's stories that win hearts, and hearts are what ultimately move people to action. Pause before reacting emotionally. We've all had moments where emotions take over. You get angry at a comment, frustrated by a situation, or hurt by someone's words, and before you know it, you snap back. Later, you regret it. You think, I shouldn't have said that, or I overreacted. The problem isn't the emotion itself. Emotions are natural and important. The problem is reacting too quickly. That's why one of the most powerful skills you can build is to pause before reacting emotionally. Here's why it works. Emotions are like waves. They rise quickly, peak, and then fall. If you act at the peak, when anger or frustration is at its strongest, you're not making a rational decision. You're just reacting. But if you can pause, even for a few seconds, you give your brain time to process. That short pause allows the emotional wave to pass, giving your rational mind a chance to step in. Think of it like a traffic light. Red means stop, green means go. But the most important light is yellow, the pause in between. Without it, everything crashes. That pause is what saves you from saying or doing something you'll regret. Practical example. Imagine someone criticizes you harshly at work. Your instinct might be to defend yourself immediately, maybe even snap back. But if you pause, take a breath, count to 5, or simply stay silent, you create space. In that space, you can choose how to respond instead of being controlled by impulse. Maybe you decide to clarify calmly. Maybe you choose to let it go. Either way, your response is intentional, not reactive. Pausing doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means acknowledging them without letting them drive the car. You might feel anger, sadness, or frustration. That's fine, but you don't have to act on it right away. This is emotional intelligence in action, the ability to feel deeply but respond, and wisely. Over time, this practice strengthens your relationships. People trust those who can stay calm under pressure. They see you as thoughtful, composed, and reliable. It also reduces conflict in your life, because many arguments spiral out of control simply because no one stopped to pause. How do you build this skill? Start small. When you feel triggered, practice taking one deep breath before speaking, or count slowly to 3 in your head. Another method is to ask yourself, will this matter in a day, a week, a year? That perspective often shrinks the intensity of the moment. The more you practice, the more automatic the pause becomes. Pausing is powerful because it gives you freedom. Instead of being a prisoner of your emotions, you become the master of them. You still feel, but you choose. And that choice, that single moment of pause, can change the outcome of a conversation, a relationship, or even your entire day. So the next time your emotions flare up, remember, you don't have to react instantly. Take a breath, create a pause, because that pause is where your power lies. Reframe failure as feedback. Most people see failure as the end of the road, proof that they're not good enough. But failure isn't final, it's information. Every setback shows you what didn't work, and that knowledge is valuable. When you reframe failure as feedback, you stop fearing mistakes and start using them as lessons. Think of it like a scientist running experiments. If one doesn't work, it's not a disaster. It's data that points the way forward. Life works the same way. Each failure is simply feedback that helps you adjust, grow, and try again with more wisdom than before. So don't avoid failure. Expect it, learn from it, because failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone toward it. Ask, what would future me thank me for? When faced with choices, it's easy to focus on what feels good right now. Scrolling on your phone, skipping the workout, putting off the hard task. But a powerful way to make better decisions is to pause and ask, what would future me thank me for? This question shifts your perspective. Instead of thinking only about the short-term comfort, you consider the long-term benefit. Future you will thank you for saving money instead of overspending, for eating healthy instead of indulging every day, for practicing a skill instead of procrastinating. Suddenly, the harder choice now becomes the smarter choice later. It doesn't mean you can never relax or enjoy yourself. Balance matters. But using this question helps you filter out impulsive actions that your future self would regret. It reminds you that today's choices are building tomorrow's life. So next time you're stuck, ask yourself, will future me be grateful for this decision? If the answer is yes, you're on the right path. Use constraint thinking. Most people see limitations as obstacles. Not enough time, not enough money, not enough resources, and they stop before they start. But what if those limits weren't barriers, but tools? That's the power of constraint thinking, using restrictions as a way to spark creativity and efficiency. Think about it. When filmmakers have small budgets, they often come up with clever solutions that make the movie more unique. When writers give themselves word limits, they're forced to be sharper and clearer. When entrepreneurs start with little funding, they build leaner, smarter businesses. The constraint pushes innovation. Without limits, we tend to waste time, overcomplicate, and delay. With constraints, we're forced to focus on what matters most. Instead of asking, what can I do with unlimited resources? Try asking, what's the best I can create within this limit? Often the result is not just good, it's better, because constraints cut away the unnecessary and bring out the best in your problem-solving ability. Prime your mind before sleep. Sleep isn't just rest for your body, it's also training time for your brain. What you focus on before bed often sinks into your subconscious, shaping your thoughts, mood, and even creativity. That's why it's smart to prime your mind before sleep. Instead of scrolling through social media or stressing about problems, choose inputs that feed your growth. Read a few pages of an inspiring book, reflect on what went well during the day, or visualize tomorrow's goals. This sets a positive direction for your subconscious to work on while you sleep. Many successful people use this trick. They review their priorities at night so they wake up with clarity. Some even journal questions they want answers to, trusting their mind to connect ideas overnight. Your nighttime focus becomes tomorrow's mindset. So, before bed, don't just shut down. Tune in. Give your brain something valuable to process, and let sleep become part of your growth strategy. Learn in spaced intervals. Most people try to learn by cramming, reading or repeating the same thing over and over in one sitting. It feels productive in the moment, but the information usually fades quickly. A smarter approach is spaced learning, reviewing material in intervals over time. Here's why it works. Each time you revisit something after a gap, your brain has to work a little harder to recall it. That effort strengthens memory, like exercising a muscle. Instead of memorizing for a day and forgetting, you build knowledge that lasts for weeks, months, or even years. Think about learning a language. If you study for 5 hours straight, you might remember words the next day but forget them a week later. But if you study for 20 minutes daily over several weeks, the repetition locks it into long-term memory. The principle is simple. Shorter, spaced sessions beat long, crowded ones. Whether you're preparing for exams, mastering a skill, or learning at work, Break it up and let your brain rest in between. Learning isn't about time spent. It's about how often you come back to it. Focus on inputs you control. Life throws a lot at us that we can't control. Other people's opinions, the economy, random setbacks, unexpected problems. Worrying about those things only drains energy and leaves us stuck. The smarter approach is to focus on the inputs you control. Inputs are your actions, the effort you put in, the habits you build, the choices you make each day. Outputs, like results, rewards, or recognition, are influenced by many outside factors. You can't force them, but you can influence them by consistently controlling your inputs. For example, you can't control whether a job application gets accepted, but you can control how many quality applications you send, how well you prepare, and the skills you develop. You can't control if a video goes viral, but you can control showing up, creating valuable content, and improving each time. When you focus on inputs, you stay empowered. Success stops being about luck or external approval and starts being about progress you can measure daily. Over time, consistent inputs naturally lead to better outputs. Use a one-word theme for the year. Most people set long lists of New Year's resolutions, but by February, many of them are already forgotten. A simpler and more powerful approach is to choose a one-word theme for the year. This single word acts as your compass, guiding decisions and keeping you focused on what truly matters. For example, if your word is health, it reminds you to prioritize fitness, nutrition, and rest in your daily choices. If your word is growth, it pushes you toward learning, challenges, and stepping outside your comfort zone. If it's focus, it helps you cut distractions and stick with your most important projects. The beauty of one word is its simplicity. It's easy to remember, and it applies across every area of life. Whenever you're unsure what to do, you can ask, "Does this align with my word?" That clarity keeps you consistent all year long. You don't need dozens of goals to stay on track. One word, chosen with intention, can become a powerful anchor that shapes your year. Practice mental contrasting. When people set goals, they usually do one of two things. They either visualize success and get excited, or they focus on the obstacles and feel discouraged. Mental contrasting is the practice of combining both, and that's what makes it so powerful. Here's how it works. First, imagine your desired outcome in vivid detail. See yourself achieving it, feel the satisfaction, and picture the benefits. This creates motivation and energy. Then, immediately contrast it with the reality of where you are now and the obstacles in your way. By facing those challenges in advance, you prepare your mind for the work required. For example, if your goal is to get fit, don't just visualize having more energy or looking healthier. Also picture the early mornings, the cravings, and the discipline needed. This balance prevents you from being blindsided and helps you plan for real solutions. Mental contrasting is effective because it keeps optimism realistic. You stay inspired by the vision, but grounded by the effort it takes. That mix of hope and practicality turns dreams into achievable goals. Seek asymmetric bets. Not all opportunities are equal. Some require huge effort for tiny returns, while others offer massive upside with relatively little downside. These are called asymmetric bets, situations where the potential gain far outweighs the risk. Smart people actively look for them. Think about it. Starting a small side project might cost you a few hours a week, but it could grow into a life-changing business. Reading one great book might take a few days, but the insights could shape your thinking for years. Networking with the right person might take one coffee meeting, but it could open doors you never imagined. The key is to spot opportunities where the worst-case outcome is manageable, but the best-case outcome is huge. That way, even if you fail, the loss is small, but if you succeed, the reward is exponential. Life is full of choices that trade time, energy, or money for potential return. Instead of spending all your resources on things with limited payoff, train yourself to seek asymmetric bets, the ones where upside beats downside by a wide margin. Those are the bets that can change your life. Build mental models for decisions. Life is full of decisions, big and small, and the quality of your decisions shapes the quality of your life. One way to make smarter choices is to use mental models, simple frameworks that help you see problems more clearly and avoid common mistakes. A mental model is like a lens you can apply to a situation. For example, The 80-20 rule reminds you that 20% of your actions often create 80% of the results. First principles thinking encourages you to break problems down to their basics instead of relying on assumptions. Opportunity cost forces you to consider what you're giving up when you choose one option over another. The more mental models you collect, the more tools you have to analyze challenges from different angles. Instead of relying on guesswork or emotions, you lean on proven ways of thinking. You don't need to master every model at once. Just start by learning a few and applying them to real decisions. Over time, they'll become second nature, helping you cut through complexity and choose more wisely. Apply the rule of 3 for focus. It's easy to get overwhelmed by long to-do lists. When everything feels important, nothing gets the attention it deserves. The rule of 3 is a simple way to cut through the noise. Each day, identify the 3 most important things you want to accomplish, and focus on those first. Why 3? Because it's small enough to be realistic, but big enough to make real progress. If you try to do 10 things, you'll scatter your energy. If you focus on just one, you might miss other priorities. But 3 forces you to choose wisely and gives you a balanced target to hit. This rule works on different timescales too. You can set 3 priorities for the day, 3 for the week, and even 3 for the year. It creates clarity and prevents overwhelm, because you always know what truly matters right now. By limiting your focus, you increase your impact. Instead of being busy with dozens of small tasks, you end the day knowing you've made real progress on the things that move the needle. Ask what's missing. When we're solving problems or chasing goals, our natural tendency is to focus on what's already in front of us. The data we have, the resources we see, the steps we've already mapped out. But sometimes the most important factor isn't what's present, it's what's absent. That's why a powerful question to ask in any situation is, what's missing? This question shifts your perspective. Instead of only analyzing what you already know, it forces you to look for the blind spots. Maybe your plan has effort but lacks clarity. Maybe your project has speed but lacks quality. Maybe your team has talent but lacks alignment. By asking what's missing, you uncover the gaps that could derail success before they turn into real problems. History is full of examples. Businesses often fail not because of what they did, but because of what they didn't do. Ignoring customer feedback, neglecting marketing, or failing to adapt to change. Students struggle not because they aren't studying, but because they're missing the right methods of practice. Even relationships break down, not because of constant fights, but because of what's missing: communication, empathy, or trust. Asking what's missing also improves creativity. Imagine you're writing a story or designing a product. Instead of only refining what's already there, you can ask, what's not here that could make this complete? That opens up possibilities you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. To apply this in daily life, build it into your reflection process. At the end of a work session, ask, what's missing from this plan that would make it stronger? Before making a decision, ask, what information am I missing that could change my mind? And when reflecting on personal growth, ask, what's missing from my habits or mindset that's holding me back? The beauty of this question is that it keeps you humble and eyes. It reminds you that you don't always see the full picture, and that improvement often comes not from adding more effort, but from filling in the missing pieces. So next time you feel stuck, incomplete, or uncertain, don't just double down on what's already in front of you. Step back and ask, what's missing? Because the answer to that question might be the key that unlocks your progress. Seek disconfirming evidence. Most of us like to be right. It feels good to find information that supports our beliefs and decisions. But here's the danger. When you only look for evidence that confirms your viewpoint, you fall into confirmation bias. You create an echo chamber where your ideas feel stronger than they really are. The smarter approach is to actively seek disconfirming evidence, to look for proof that challenges your assumptions. Why is this so powerful? Because being wrong early is far less costly than being wrong later. Imagine launching a product only to discover after months of work that customers don't actually want it. If you had searched for disconfirming feedback at the start, asking critical questions, testing assumptions, or talking to skeptical people, you could have saved time, money, and frustration. This practice also sharpens your thinking. When you force yourself to see the other side, you spot weak points in your arguments, blind spots in your reasoning, and risks you may have ignored. Scientists do this naturally. They don't just try to prove their hypotheses. They design experiments that could disprove them. That's how knowledge grows stronger, by surviving tough challenges, not by avoiding them. It takes humility, though. Seeking disconfirming evidence means being willing to admit you might be wrong. It means surrounding yourself not just with people who agree with you, but also with those who ask hard questions. It means testing your plans against reality, not just against your hopes. The upside is huge. If your idea survives disconfirming evidence, you know it's solid, and if it doesn't, you've learned something valuable before it's too late. Either way, you win. To practice this, ask yourself, what would prove me wrong? Or, what would someone who disagrees with me say? Then go find that information. Instead of defending your assumptions, stress test them. The truth doesn't need protection, it needs discovery. And the best way to discover it is by looking for the cracks, not just the confirmations. So don't just ask, how am I right? Also ask, how could I be wrong? Because seeking disconfirming evidence doesn't weaken your ideas. It makes the ones that survive much, much stronger. Use boredom to incubate creativity. In today's world, boredom feels like an enemy. The moment we have a gap in time, waiting in line, sitting on a bus, winding down before bed, we reach for our phones, scroll through social media, or distract ourselves instantly. But boredom isn't something to run from. It's actually one of the most powerful tools for creativity, if you know how to use it. Here's why. When you're bored, your brain enters a state called the default mode network. This is when your mind starts wandering, connecting random dots, and generating fresh ideas. It's the same state that makes people say, I get my best ideas in the shower. The absence of constant stimulation gives your brain the space to incubate new thoughts. But when you fill every quiet moment with noise, notifications, endless scrolling, or constant entertainment, you rob yourself of that incubation time. Your brain never gets the stillness it needs to create. That's why some of the most innovative thinkers in history deliberately embraced boredom. They took long walks, sat in silence, or gave themselves time with nothing to do. Out of that space came breakthroughs. You can use this too. Instead of rushing to fill every idle moment, allow yourself to sit with boredom. Next time you're waiting, don't reach for your phone. Just let your mind wander. If you're stuck on a problem, take a walk without headphones and see where your thoughts drift. Often the best solutions appear when you're not forcing them. Boredom also strengthens focus. When you learn to sit with it, you retrain your brain to stop craving constant stimulation. That patience makes it easier to dive into deep work and resist distractions. So instead of treating boredom as wasted time, see it as fertile ground for ideas. Give yourself permission to be bored, because in those empty moments, your brain is quietly working, connecting, and creating. The next time you feel restless, don't ask, how can I escape this boredom? Ask, what might this boredom be trying to create? That simple shift could unlock your next big idea. Audit commitments for energy. We often think of time as our most limited resource, but in reality, energy is just as important. You might have hours in the day, but if you're drained, unfocused, or burned out, those hours don't mean much. One of the best ways to protect your energy is to regularly audit your commitments. Here's the truth. Not every obligation in your life deserves a permanent place. Over time, we say yes to projects, routines, responsibilities, and even relationships that may have made sense once but no longer align with our goals or values. Each one might seem small, but together they drain mental, emotional, and physical energy. That's why it's essential to pause and ask, where is my energy going, and is it worth it? Start by listing your current commitments. Work tasks, side projects, social obligations, memberships, habits, even the people you spend time with. Then, evaluate them honestly. Which ones energize you? Which ones drain you? Which ones are truly necessary? And which ones are you doing just out of habit, guilt, or fear of saying no? Often you'll find that 20% of your commitments give you 80% of your growth, fulfillment, or joy. The rest are dead weight. By cutting or reducing those low-value commitments, you free up energy for what actually matters: your health, your relationships, your personal growth, and your highest goals. This doesn't mean you should avoid hard work or uncomfortable challenges. Growth often requires discomfort. The key is to distinguish between commitments that stretch you in meaningful ways versus ones that simply drain you without a return. Auditing your commitments also helps you set boundaries. When you learn to say no to what no longer serves you, you're really saying yes to your future self. You create space to focus deeply instead of spreading yourself too thin. So take the time, maybe once every few months, to step back and examine your commitments with fresh eyes. Ask, if I were designing my life from scratch today, would I choose this again? If the answer is no, it may be time to let it go. Your energy is too valuable to spend on the wrong things. Audit your commitments, reclaim your focus, and invest that energy where it will create the biggest impact. Do the hardest task first. Every day comes with a list of things to do. Some are easy, answering emails, tidying up, quick errands. Others are harder, the big, meaningful tasks that require focus, courage, or creativity. The mistake many people make is starting with the easy stuff, thinking they'll warm up before tackling the big one. But often, the day slips away, and that hardest, most important task gets pushed to tomorrow. That's why one of the most effective productivity habits is simple: do the hardest task first. This approach is often called eating the frog, based on Mark Twain's saying, if the first thing you do each morning is eat a frog, you can go through the rest of the day knowing the worst is behind you. In other words, once you've handled the tough, intimidating task, everything else feels lighter and easier. Why does this work so well? For one, your willpower and focus are highest in the morning. As the day goes on, distractions multiply, energy dips, and decision fatigue creeps in. If you leave your hardest task for later, you're trying to climb a mountain when you're already tired. By doing it first, you use your best energy on what matters most. It also builds momentum. Finishing a hard task early gives you a sense of accomplishment that fuels the rest of your day. Instead of feeling guilty about procrastination, you feel proud and motivated to keep going. Think about it. If you do 3 small tasks and avoid the big one, you may feel busy but not productive. But if you do the one hardest, most impactful task, even if nothing else gets done, your day was a success. That single win often outweighs 10 smaller tasks combined. Of course, hardest doesn't always mean the longest. Sometimes it's the task you're most afraid of, the tough conversation, the bold decision, or the creative project that feels overwhelming. That's exactly why it should come first. The thing you avoid is usually the thing that will move you forward the most. So tomorrow morning, instead of opening your inbox or checking your phone, ask yourself, what's the hardest, highest impact thing I could do today? Then tackle it before anything else. Make it your first victory, and watch how it transforms the rest of your day. Because success isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters most, and doing it first. Use premortems before projects. Most people wait until a project fails to analyze what went wrong. They do a postmortem, a review after the damage is done. But what if you could spot the problems before they happen? That's exactly what a premortem is. Imagining your project has already failed and then working backward to identify why. Here's how it works. Before starting, gather your team, or just yourself if it's a solo project. Imagine 6 months from now, the project completely flopped. Ask, what went wrong? What caused this failure? Write down every possible reason. Missed deadlines, unclear goals, lack of resources, poor communication, wrong assumptions, or unexpected challenges. By doing this, you shift your perspective. Instead of blindly charging ahead with optimism, you deliberately look for weaknesses. This isn't being negative, it's being realistic. Once you've identified the potential pitfalls, you can take steps to prevent them before they happen. If you think deadlines might slip, build in buffer time. If you worry about unclear communication, set up regular check-ins. If assumptions could be wrong, test them early with small experiments. The value of a premortem is that it surfaces blind spots while you still have the chance to fix them. It's much cheaper to prevent problems on paper than to deal with them in real life. In fact, some of the world's top organizations use this method to reduce risk and improve outcomes, from businesses launching products to doctors planning surgeries. On a personal level, you can apply premortems too. Planning a big trip? Imagine everything goes wrong. Missed flights, lost luggage, poor planning, then prepare backups. Starting a new habit? Picture yourself quitting after a week. What caused it? Too much pressure? No accountability? Then address those issues up front. Optimism inspires action, but preparation ensue. Res success. A premortem balances both. You dream big, but also prepare for the bumps on the road. That way, when challenges come, and they always do, you're ready, not surprised. So before you jump into your next big project, pause. Ask yourself, if this failed, what would the reasons be? Then use those answers as a map to strengthen your plan. Because the best way to avoid failure is to imagine it first. Protect your attention like gold. Treating your attention like gold means recognizing it as your most precious and limited resource. Time is finite, but how well you use it depends entirely on where your focus goes. You might have hours in a day, yet accomplish little if your mind is scattered. Today, attention faces constant assault, from notifications, open tabs, and endless demands, all vying for instant reaction. Those who succeed are the ones who guard their mental space as jealously as any treasure. Every task switch, ping response, or glance at your phone carries a hidden cost. Your brain takes minutes to fully reorient, and these tiny leaks chip away at deep work and creative flow. By day's end, they leave you drained, surviving on fragments of concentration. Protecting your attention requires strict boundaries, disabling distractions, blocking disruptive sites, and reserving sacred blocks of uninterrupted focus. It means saying no without guilt and shaping environments where focus is natural, not rare. Masters of attention understand its power. Sustained focus accelerates learning, deep thinking, and meaningful creation. They don't waste it on every trivial demand or fleeting pleasure. They channel it toward what truly matters: tasks, people, and goals. Attention is the currency of achievement. Spend it recklessly, and you remain impoverished in every way. Guard it like gold, and it multiplies into clarity, skill, and lasting impact. Use curiosity as a productivity trigger. Using curiosity as a productivity trigger is a mental shortcut that turns work from a forced effort into something you can't resist. At its heart, it leverages the brain's natural drive for exploration and novelty to pull you into action, especially on tasks you've been avoiding. Rather than relying solely on discipline, you ignite motivation with a question, puzzle, or gap in understanding. The brain craves closure. When faced with an unanswered question or incomplete pattern, it becomes restless, seeking resolution. That's why cliffhangers keep you glued to a show, and mysteries keep you reading until the last page. You can use this same pull for productivity by creating curiosity hooks around your tasks. If a report feels tedious, ask, what surprising insight might I uncover here? If researching a market, wonder, what hidden trend is everyone overlooking? Once your mind locks onto a question it wants answered, resistance fades and the task pulls you in. Curiosity also changes your emotional state. Pressure and boredom give way to engagement and playfulness. Work stops feeling like a chore and becomes a quest. The more you start with curiosity, the more your brain learns to link beginnings with intrigue rather than dread. When you master this, procrastination loses its grip. You're no longer pushing yourself. You're being pulled forward by the irresistible urge to discover what comes next. Speak last in group settings. Speaking last in group settings is a subtle but highly effective strategy that lets you gather insights, read the emotional climate, and deliver your words with maximum impact. Most people rush to speak early, eager to share ideas, assert themselves, or demonstrate value. But speaking first exposes your position before you understand the full picture and sacrifices the advantage of careful observation. When you speak last, you can watch not only what others say, but how they say it, their tone, hesitation, confidence, and emotional investment. You see alliances form, tensions rise, and hidden concerns surface. By the time it's your turn, you're informed. You know which points resonate, where objections lie, and how to frame your response. This allows you to address unspoken concerns, bridge divides, or guide the group toward your intended outcome with minimal resistance. Speaking last also carries psychological weight. The final words linger, framing the conversation as it concludes. It signals thoughtfulness and authority because you have listened, processed, and chosen your moment intentionally. Leaders, negotiators, and skilled influencers rely on this skill. Silence becomes a tool, demonstrating confidence, patience, and control. You're not competing to be heard. You're waiting for the perfect moment, so your words carry more weight than anyone else's in the room. Turn why me into what now. Turning why me into what now is the mental shift that moves you from powerless victim to decisive strategist in an instant. At its core, this approach rejects the trap of self-pity and blame, redirecting energy entirely toward action. Asking why me keeps you anchored in the past, fixated on fairness and circumstance. Asking what now shifts attention to the present, where real change begins. When life hits loss, failure, betrayal, crisis, the impulse to ask, why me, is natural, a raw attempt to understand the injustice. But reality doesn't guarantee fairness, and dwelling on explanations only delays movement. The longer you linger in why me, the deeper resentment and helplessness pull you under. What now demands a response. It pushes you to explore options, even small ones, and repositions you from someone things happen to someone who makes things happen next. This subtle pivot transforms your posture, tone, and choices. Those who master it don't face fewer hardships. They refuse to stay stuck in them. They convert the energy of pain into action, often uncovering resilience and creativity they didn't know they had. Why me builds walls. What now finds the door, kicks it open, and steps into what comes next. End the day with tomorrow's top 3 priorities. Ending the day with tomorrow's top 3 priorities is a mental clarity ritual that changes how you start each morning and how much you achieve. Instead of waking up scrambling to figure out what matters, you begin with a ready-made plan of action. This habit eliminates decision fatigue, builds momentum immediately, and ensures your energy goes toward the tasks that truly move the needle, rather than reacting to whatever screams the loudest. Most people start their day in chaos, scrolling emails, checking messages, responding to demands, letting others dictate their focus. By the time they settle in, their prime brain hours are gone. Deciding the night before your top 3 priorities anchors your day before it begins. These are not random items. They are the high-impact actions that push your goals forward. Limiting it to 3 enforces clarity. You're forced to identify the few things that really matter, rather than dozens of busy tasks. It protects against the trap of productivity theater, where motion is mistaken for progress. The real magic comes in the morning, diving straight into your first priority without wasting willpower deciding where to start. Completing even one before noon creates a ripple of confidence and focus that lasts all day. This habit is a quiet form of power. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Each night, you're not just closing a day, you're setting up tomorrow to be unstoppable. Use perspective zoom out in stress. Perspective zoom out is a mental escape hatch that lifts you out of stress's suffocating grip by expanding your view beyond the immediate crisis. When overwhelmed, your mind narrows to the problem in front of you, making it feel like the only thing that exists. Perspective zoom out reverses that tunnel vision, showing that what feels massive now is often just a moment in a far larger picture. The method is simple but effective. Step outside your immediate emotions and imagine the situation from a higher vantage point. How will it matter in a year, 5 years, or across your entire life? You can stretch it further. See yourself as a character in history or from someone on another planet. The wider the lens, the smaller the problem feels. This works because the brain's stress response is designed for survival, not perspective. It locks you into fight or flight mode, making the problem seem urgent and absolute. Zooming out signals to your nervous system that this isn't the end of the world, lowering emotional intensity and freeing your mind for rational thinking. Perspective zoom out doesn't remove the challenge. It shrinks its emotional weight, so you can approach it with clarity instead of panic. From this vantage, solutions often appear that you couldn't see before. You regain the ability to act calmly rather than react blindly. Master this, and stress stops feeling like a tidal wave. It becomes a ripple in a vast ocean, one you can navigate instead of being swallowed, because you remember you are far larger than the moment at hand. Avoid binary thinking. Look for the third option. Avoiding binary thinking is the mental practice of refusing to accept that your choices are limited to this or that, yes or no, win or lose. Binary thinking feels simple, and our brains crave clear black and white categories. But most real-world situations exist in shades of gray. The most powerful solutions often emerge only when you escape the false trap of 2 extremes and seek the third option. When you see choices as purely binary, you unknowingly limit your creativity. Should I quit my job or stay miserable? Accept this deal or walk away? Tell the truth and hurt them or lie to protect them? In most cases, there are overlooked alternatives. redesign the role, negotiate new terms, deliver truth with empathy. The third option is the space of innovation, where breakthroughs happen. Binary thinking triggers your brain's fight or flight response, narrowing your perspective. Searching for the third option forces your mind to slow, expand, and reframe the problem. Suddenly, you're not reacting, you're creating. You stop playing the game you've been handed and start designing a new one. Visionaries, entrepreneurs, and skilled negotiators excel at this. They reject either-or traps, asking instead, what solution has no one considered yet? This mindset produces smarter outcomes and makes you unpredictably effective. While others argue over two fixed paths, you step onto a third one entirely, and that's where real advantage lives. Practice mental subtraction to appreciate more. Practicing mental subtraction is a counterintuitive gratitude technique that helps you truly value what you have by imagining it's gone. At its core, this method flips the usual desire for more, inviting you instead to picture life without the people, possessions, abilities, and opportunities you often take for granted. The effect is immediate and striking. What once felt ordinary suddenly becomes precious. Our brains adapt quickly. Things we once longed for, a stable job, a loving partner, good health, can fade into the background as we get used to them. This hedonic adaptation makes it easy to overlook blessings until they're gone. Mental subtraction interrupts that process by creating a controlled absence, letting you feel the weight of loss without actually losing anything. The technique is simple but profound. Pick someone or something you value deeply, then imagine in vivid detail that it's gone. The silence in the house, the void in your routine, the frustration of missing a skill you rely on daily. Let yourself feel it fully, then return to reality and notice it's still here, still yours. This works because emotion is more powerful than logic. You can list reasons to be grateful endlessly, but feeling the pain of imagined loss makes appreciation surge in ways words cannot. People who practice mental subtraction report deeper happiness, stronger relationships, and sharper awareness of their fortune, not because they gained more, but because they finally see how much they already have. Ask compared to what? Often, asking compared to what is a mental clarity tool that cuts through bias, emotional fog, and misleading narratives. It forces your brain to anchor every judgment, fear, or decision against a real alternative, instead of letting vague impressions or exaggerated feelings guide you. Without it, decisions are made in a vacuum, reacting to surface-level data without seeing the full picture. Humans naturally judge things in isolation. Something feels expensive, risky, or bad simply because we haven't paused to compare it. A job offer may seem low until measured against your current pay and growth. A business risk may appear terrifying until weighed against the risk of doing nothing. Even failure seems devastating until compared with the regret of never trying. Compared to what strips away emotional drama and reveals the trade-offs clearly. Every choice is a comparison, even if we ignore it. You're not just quitting a job, you're choosing between your current situation and what could replace it. You're not just investing. You're choosing between putting money to work or letting inflation quietly erode it. This question also protects against manipulation. Politicians, marketers, and even friends often present information without a baseline, making something seem better or worse than it is. Asking compared to what restores perspective, forcing the full context into view. Clarity doesn't come from seeing a choice in isolation. It comes from seeing it next to its alternatives. One simple question can transform impulsive reactions into confident, calculated decisions. Reframe competition as collaboration. Reframing competition as collaboration is a mindset shift that turns rivals into allies and transforms the game from win-lose to win-win. Most people treat competition as a battlefield. Resources are scarce, success is limited, and someone else's gain feels like your loss. This thinking fosters insecurity, defensiveness, and short-sighted moves. But seeing competitors as potential collaborators changes the dynamic entirely. It opens doors to shared resources, mutual learning, and opportunities that rivalry alone could never create. At its core, this works because it taps into one of the strongest human instincts: connection. Even in competitive environments, people are drawn to those who respect their skills and value cooperation. Approaching a competitor with curiosity instead of hostility turns tension into dialogue. They may have strengths you lack, and you may offer what they need. Together, you can reach bigger audiences, solve larger problems, or innovate faster than alone. Collaboration also eases the mental fatigue of constant comparison. Instead of being trapped in one-upmanship, you adopt a mindset of shared growth. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to learn, exchange ideas, and expand your network rather than tear someone else down. Many of the world's greatest breakthroughs weren't the work of solitary genius. They came from unlikely alliances between potential competitors. When you stop guarding your turf and start building together, you stop playing a small game. You begin creating something far bigger than either side could achieve alone. Use body language to shift mood. Using body language to shift your mood is a science-backed technique that changes your physiology to influence your psychology. Most people assume emotions dictate posture. Confidence makes you stand tall. Defeat makes you slump. But it also works in reverse. Your brain reads your body's signals and adjusts your emotional state accordingly. By deliberately adopting the posture, movements, and facial expressions of the mood you want, you can trick your brain into feeling it. This works because of the mind-body feedback loop. Sitting up straight, lifting your chin, rolling your shoulders back, and breathing deeply signals safety and strength to your nervous system. Stress hormones drop, your voice steadies, and your thinking sharpens. Smile, even if you don't feel like it, and your brain releases dopamine and serotonin. Move with purpose, and your mind believes you have purpose. Athletes use this principle. They don't wait to feel ready. They jump, stretch, pound their chest, or strike a power pose to get in the zone. You can do the same before a meeting, a difficult conversation, or any moment you need confidence on demand. The beauty of this method is its immediacy. You don't need to wait for motivation or inspiration. You generate it. Change your stance, and you change your state. Your body isn't just a reflection of your emotions. It's a remote control for your mind. Practice intentional breathing. Practicing intentional breathing is one of the fastest ways to take control of your body, mind, and emotions because it taps directly into the nervous system's control center. At its core, this technique replaces unconscious, shallow breaths with deliberate, controlled patterns that signal to your brain. You are safe, focused, and in control. Most people breathe on autopilot, letting stress, posture, and distractions dictate their rhythm. Under pressure, breaths become short and rapid, fueling anxiety and tension. Intentional breathing reverses this. Slow, deep, purposeful breaths calm the fight-or-flight response and activate the body's relaxation system. Within minutes, heart rate steadies, thoughts clear, and emotional turbulence begins to settle. This isn't theory, it's biology. Breath is one of the few functions governed by both conscious and subconscious processes. Taking control of it influences everything from blood pressure to mental focus. Techniques like box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, or diaphragmatic breathing have been used by Navy SEALs, elite athletes, and monks to stay sharp under pressure. Intentional breathing also anchors you to the present moment, cutting through racing thoughts and pulling you out of past regrets or future worries. In high-stakes meetings, before public speaking, or during personal conflict, even a single minute of focused breathing can transform your response. Master your breath, and you master your state. Each inhale fuels you. Each exhale releases tension. In that simple rhythm, you reclaim a calm no external force can touch. Think like a scientist, not a preacher. Thinking like a scientist, not a preacher, is the practice of seeking truth instead of defending belief. A preacher starts with a conclusion and hunts for evidence to justify it. A scientist starts with a question, tests reality, and is willing to be proven wrong. This mindset is one of the most powerful ways to make better decisions, avoid blind spots, and grow faster than those who cling to certainty. The danger of thinking like a preacher is that it locks you into intellectual armor. Once your identity is tied to an idea, your business strategy, political stance, or self-image, you stop seeing clearly. Contradictory data is rejected, and you surround yourself with agreement, protecting beliefs like sacred relics. It feels safe, but it slows progress. Thinking like a scientist is different. You treat ideas as experiments, testable, adjustable, and temporary. You care less about being right than about getting it right. When evidence challenges you, you adapt instead of doubling down. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you unstoppable, constantly aligned with reality rather than defending illusions. It requires humility, the courage to admit potential error, and curiosity, the drive to discover truth even when it's uncomfortable. It also gives you a strategic edge. You pivot faster, learn faster, and spot patterns others miss because ego doesn't blind you. When you think like a scientist, every mistake becomes data, every failure feedback, and every belief flexible enough to evolve. In a world of preachers, the scientist quietly wins. Reward effort, not just results. Rewarding effort, not just results, is a mindset shift that builds resilience, fuels long-term growth, and shields you from the invisible poison of perfectionism. Most people celebrate only when they win, closing the deal, hitting the target, or reaching a milestone. This creates a trap. Self-worth becomes tied entirely to outcomes often beyond your control. When results fall short, motivation collapses. Focusing on effort flips the script. Instead of asking, "Did I win?" ask, "Did I show up fully?" Celebrate the training session even if no record is set, the sales calls even if they don't close, the writing session even if the chapter isn't finished. You reinforce behaviors that lead to success, not just moments of triumph. Psychologically, this works because it keeps your brain engaged with the process rather than the prize. Dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical, is released not just upon achievement, but when progress is anticipated. Rewarding effort creates constant dopamine loops, making it more likely you'll stick with slow, difficult goals others abandon. It also makes you fearless. If only outcomes matter, you avoid risks where failure is possible. But rewarding effort frees you to try, experiment, and push limits without fear of losing value. Over time, this habit rewires your identity. You stop being someone who feels good only when they win and become someone who thrives by knowing every step forward, no matter how small, is worth celebrating. That mindset makes winning inevitable. Use constraints to fuel innovation. Using constraints to fuel innovation is the counterintuitive practice of turning limits into launchpads. Most people see constraints, lack of time, money, resources, or options, as obstacles that stifle creativity. But history shows the opposite. Embraced wisely, constraints force the mind to dig deeper, think sharper, and invent solutions abundance would never demand. This works because the human brain craves efficiency and avoids effort. When everything is available, we default to easy, predictable answers. But when familiar paths are blocked, our minds forge new ones. Some of the greatest innovations were born in scarcity. Creators, entrepreneurs, and problem solvers had no choice but to work with what they had. Limited film budgets sparked inventive camera tricks. Tight deadlines birthed iconic campaigns. Artists produced masterpieces with minimal tools. Constraints sharpen focus, strip away distractions, and push you to ask better questions. How can I achieve this without X? What's the simplest way to make it work? If I could choose only one feature, which matters most? These questions produce leaner, smarter, and more impactful outcomes. Instead of fighting limits, frame them as the boundaries of a game you're determined to win. Every limitation becomes a puzzle to solve. And when you do, your solutions are often stronger, faster, and more original than if you had unlimited freedom. True innovation isn't born from having everything. It's born from having just enough to force genius. Recognize patterns in your thinking. Recognizing patterns in your thinking is a self-awareness skill that uncovers the hidden scripts quietly guiding your decisions, emotions, and behaviors. At its core, this practice involves stepping outside the constant stream of thoughts to observe them from a distance, noticing recurring loops, triggers, and biases shaping your reality without your consent. Once you identify the pattern, you gain the power to change it. Most people live inside their thoughts without question, mistaking familiar mental habits for truth. I always mess this up. People can't be trusted. I'm not cut out for that. These repeated storylines become invisible walls, trapping you in the same reactions and outcomes. But when you pause and notice, "I've thought this exact thing before," you realize it's not fate, it's a pattern, and patterns can be rewired. This process requires brutal honesty. Track when emotions spike, when procrastination hits, when self-doubt whispers the same old lines. Over time, connections emerge. A critical email triggers defensiveness, a certain task sparks avoidance, specific praise triggers overconfidence. Awareness alone is shocking, like spotting the strings of a puppet you didn't know controlled you. This is where change begins. You can interrupt cycles, insert new thoughts, or replace outdated scripts with empowering ones. Recognizing patterns isn't about controlling every thought. It's about refusing to be controlled by the ones that keep you stuck. Once you see the machinery of your mind, you're no longer a passenger. You're holding the wheel. Rehearse future challenges in your mind, Rehearsing future challenges in your mind is like running a fire drill for your life. It's the deliberate practice of visualizing high-pressure, high-stakes situations before they occur, so when they do, you've already experienced them and know how to respond. This isn't wishful thinking. It's stress inoculation, training your mind and emotions to stay steady when others falter. When caught off guard, your brain's survival wiring kicks in. Adrenaline spikes, rational thinking narrows, and instinct often defaults to panic or hesitation. Mental rehearsal builds a blueprint in advance. You've already felt the pressure, heard the sounds, imagined setbacks, and planned your moves. Your brain treats the real moment like familiar terrain, reducing fear and sharpening focus. Athletes run entire plays in their heads until muscle memory kicks in. Negotiators rehearse tough conversations, anticipating objections and responses. Surgeons visualize complex procedures step by step before making the first incision. The more vividly you imagine sights, sounds, and emotions, the stronger the effect. This technique prepares you not just for success, but for failure and recovery. You can envision things going wrong, then walk yourself through adaptation and regaining control. When reality arrives, you've already faced the worst, at least in your mind. When the challenge comes, you're not shocked or scrambling. You're ready. You've been here before. While others ask, "What now?" You're already moving. Collect mental triggers that inspire action. Collecting mental triggers that inspire action is the practice of creating a personal toolkit of thoughts, images, sounds, and cues that instantly shift your brain from hesitation to movement. At its core, it's about knowing exactly what sparks your motivation and surrounding yourself with those triggers, so taking action becomes automatic rather than a battle against resistance. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. Certain stimuli, a song, a phrase, a smell, or even a single image, can immediately change your emotional state. A line from a movie can make you feel unstoppable. A song can push you to run faster. A photo from a proud moment can nudge you to tackle a task you've been avoiding. By deliberately collecting these triggers, you build a custom ignition system for your drive. The key is to find what truly energizes you, not what should motivate you, but what actually does. Maybe it's a highlight reel of athletes, a recording of your goals, a quote that reminds you of overcoming the impossible, or a piece of music tied to a personal victory. Once identified, place them where they can't be ignored, on your phone, your wall, your workspace, or in your playlist. Mental triggers bypass overthinking. They don't negotiate with excuses. They jolt you straight into action. With a library of these cues, you don't wait for motivation. It arrives on command. Action becomes reflexive, and progress shifts from struggle to your natural state. Keep an anti-goals list. Keeping an anti-goals list is the intentional practice of defining exactly what you want to avoid, so your choices are designed to steer clear of it. While most people focus on what they do want, wealth, success, freedom, they rarely clarify what they don't want. Yet it's often the things we tolerate or stumble into that quietly drain our energy. Bad clients, toxic environments, or commitments that sap happiness and performance. An anti-goals list acts as a personal warning system. It might include no more than 3 meetings per day, never working with people you don't trust, avoiding projects that require weekend work, or limiting business travel to less than a week. This isn't about avoiding all discomfort. It's about avoiding patterns that erode your values, energy, and priorities. Clarity works as a filter. Knowing your anti-goals makes decision-making faster and cleaner. You stop chasing glittering opportunities that burn you out. You stop compromising on things that poison momentum. You stop saying yes just because you can, and start protecting space for what truly matters. High performers use anti-goals as guardrails. They don't just plan for success. They actively plan against failure. The paradox is clear. By defining what you refuse to allow, you make room for exactly what you want. An anti-goals list isn't limitation. It's liberation. It's the blueprint for a life that feels as good as it looks. Assume positive intent in others. Assuming positive intent in others is the conscious choice to believe that most people's actions, even when clumsy, frustrating, or hurtful, stem from misunderstanding, pressure, or their own struggles, not malice. This isn't naivety or ignoring harmful behavior. It's about disarming the instinct to see enemies where there may be none. This mindset transforms how you interpret the world, protects emotional energy, and strengthens relationships. When you assume negative intent, every delayed reply feels like rejection, every critique like an attack, and every disagreement becomes a battle. Tension builds as you read hostility where none exists. Believing most people mean well, or at least aren't trying to harm you, creates space for patience, understanding, and better communication. It diffuses conflicts before they escalate. Instead of reacting defensively, you become curious. Why did they say that? What might they be dealing with? Often the issue isn't about you. It's their bad day, their fears, or the information they had at the time. Assuming positive intent also changes your presence. People sense judgment and open up more when they feel safe. Leaders who practice this inspire trust. Friends and partners deepen bonds instead of eroding them with suspicion. Some may exploit goodwill, but they're the exception. The risk is small compared to the clarity, peace, and strength gained by moving through life believing that until proven otherwise, people are on your side. Train your attention with meditation. Training. Your attention with meditation is like a mental gym workout that strengthens the most valuable skill in the modern world. The ability to focus deeply without being hijacked by distraction. Meditation isn't about emptying your mind. It's about noticing when your attention drifts and repeatedly bringing it back. Each return is a rep, building the neural muscles of concentration. In a world of notifications, noise, and constant mental clutter, untrained attention is like a leaky bucket. No matter how much effort you pour in, progress drains away. Meditation teaches you to seal those leaks. By sitting still and focusing on your breath, a sound, or a visual point, you begin to see how often your mind wanders. Instead of judging yourself, you simply return to your focus point. Over time, this changes how you move through life. You become less reactive, less pulled by distractions, and more able to direct your mind intentionally. Conversations sharpen because you truly listen. Work becomes more productive because you can lock in for hours without drifting. Even stress feels different. You notice it and decide how to respond. Meditation is the quiet forge where attention is tempered into steel. It's not about escaping life. It's about sharpening your mind so you can cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters whenever you choose. Look for hidden upside in setbacks. Looking for hidden upside in setbacks is the mental skill of transforming pain into possibility. When life blindsides you through a failed project, lost opportunity, or personal disappointment, the natural reaction is frustration, self-blame, or despair. Yet nearly every setback contains a hidden seed, an advantage, a lesson, or a redirection you wouldn't have discovered without the failure. The key is training yourself to spot it before the wound even heals. This works because the human brain magnifies losses and downplays gains. Setbacks feel like dead ends, but they're often detours, routes guiding you toward experiences, skills, or relationships you'd otherwise miss. A lost client can push you to refine your offer and attract a better market. A rejected application might lead to a role where your talents shine brighter. A breakup can reveal neglected parts of yourself, paving the way for a healthier future. By asking, "Where's the advantage here?" or "What might this be preparing me for?" you shift from victim mode to opportunity mode. This isn't sugarcoating pain. It's refusing to waste it. People who master this mindset don't just bounce back. They bounce forward. Each setback becomes raw material for resilience, insight, and strength. Over time, you stop fearing the unexpected because you know even the worst moments can contain a gift. The upside may be buried, but once you find it, a setback stops being a scar and becomes a stepping stone. Ask, "What's the core assumption here?" Asking, "What's the core assumption here?" is a mental X-ray that slices through noise, complexity, and half-truths to reveal the single belief holding everything together. At its heart, this technique is about refusing to accept information, plans, or arguments at face value, and instead digging down to uncover the hidden premise they depend on. Once identified, you can judge whether it's solid enough to support the structure or fragile enough to collapse everything built on it. Most ideas, strategies, and opinions rest on unspoken assumptions. These assumptions go largely unquestioned because they're invisible, buried beneath layers of logic and explanation. But if the core assumption is flawed, all conclusions drawn from it are precarious at best, disastrous at worst. Asking this question forces clarity. It's like tugging a single thread to see if the entire tapestry unravels. For example, someone pitches a business idea. "We'll grow fast because the market is desperate for this product." The surface claim is growth. The core assumption is that the market is desperate. If that assumption is wrong, All plans, marketing, hiring, investment, collapse. This question works on yourself too. When you feel certain about a decision or belief, asking, "What's the core assumption here?" can expose blind spots you didn't know existed. Sometimes the assumption holds and confidence deepens. Sometimes it doesn't, and you avoid a slow-motion disaster. Either way, the clarity it provides outweighs any comforting illusion. Think in decades. Act in days. Thinking in decades. And acting in days is the mindset of holding a vast, long-term vision while executing relentless, immediate action. It's the ability to zoom out far enough to see where you're headed, yet zoom in close enough to make measurable progress today. This balance creates the rare combination of patience and urgency that drives extraordinary results. Focusing only on the short term leads to chasing quick wins and shallow rewards, often at the expense of lasting growth. Focusing only on the long-term risks, endless planning, preparing for the future without ever moving in the present. The power comes from merging the two, a vision so large it intimidates, paired with daily actions so small and consistent they almost feel trivial. Thinking in decades frees you from desperation that drives poor decisions. Temporary setbacks are bumps on a long road. A failed launch isn't a career-ending disaster, it's one experiment in a 10-year journey. This perspective protects focus and keeps you grounded under pressure. Acting in days prevents drift and complacency. You don't wait for the future. You pull it closer through immediate, tangible moves. Each day becomes a brick toward your vision. One email sent, one page written, one conversation started. Over time, these small actions compound into something massive. The magic is in the tension, patient enough to play the long game, urgent enough to never waste a day. Most people do one or the other. Those who do both change the game entirely. Use role switching to understand perspectives. Role switching to understand perspectives is the deliberate practice of stepping out of your own viewpoint and into someone else's mental and emotional world. At its core, it's about momentarily becoming the other person, seeing through their eyes, feeling with their heart, and thinking with their priorities. This isn't just empathy, it's strategic empathy, a skill that can dissolve conflict, strengthen influence, and reveal solutions you'd never find from your own angle. When tensions rise or negotiations stall, most people double down on their position, defending harder, arguing louder, and ignoring everything outside their narrative. Role switching breaks that barrier. You ask yourself, if I were them, with their history, fears, incentives, and pressures, how would this situation look? What would I want? What would I fear losing? This mental shift forces you to set aside ego long enough to see the forces shaping their behavior. Psychologically, it works because humans aren't purely logical. We're driven by emotion, identity, and unseen constraints. Stepping into another's role uncovers the hidden motivations behind their actions. You may realize they're not resisting out of spite, but protecting something they value. You may see a path where both sides win, one you'd have missed without their perspective. This doesn't mean agreeing or surrendering. It means gaining the full map instead of fighting blind. In any human interaction, the person who understands the most perspectives controls the most options. Role switching turns conversations from battles into collaborations, because you're no longer speaking at someone, you're speaking from where they stand. Treat rest as a productivity tool. Treating rest as a productivity tool is the radical rejection of the hustle culture myth that rest equals laziness. In truth, rest is the fuel that powers high performance. Your brain and body aren't machines. They're biological systems that burn out when pushed beyond limits. Treating rest as optional isn't dedication. It's self-sabotage. Recovery isn't separate from productivity. It's part of it. Sleep consolidates memory, enhances problem-solving, and repairs the brain at a cellular level. Downtime restores emotional balance, sharpens focus, and replenishes creativity. Even brief breaks, stepping away from your desk, taking a walk, closing your eyes for 5 minutes, reset your cognitive resources so you return sharper. Athletes instinctively schedule recovery with the same intensity as training, knowing growth happens in repair. The same principle applies to mental work. Deep rest after deep effort leads to deeper thinking and stronger results. When you treat rest as a tool, you plan for it instead of squeezing it in. You schedule sleep like a meeting, protect weekends like a deadline, and use micro breaks as investments in performance. The paradox. Resting strategically helps you achieve more in less time because every hour worked is fueled by full energy, not running on fumes. Rest isn't a reward for hard work. It's the reason you can work hard, think clearly, and win the long game. Keep a win journal. Keeping a win journal is the deliberate practice of recording your victories, big or small, so you build a growing archive that proves you're capable, resilient, and making progress. At its core, this technique counters your brain's negativity bias, the tendency to focus on mistakes while letting successes fade. A win journal preserves the good, turning fleeting moments of achievement into lasting reminders of your strength. Most people underestimate their progress because they measure it only against ultimate goals, overlooking daily wins that quietly compound. Finishing a tough workout, handling a difficult conversation well, sticking to a new habit for a week, these moments often vanish along with motivation. A win journal gives each victory a place to live, reinforcing the connection between your actions and positive outcomes. Writing them down strengthens confidence and momentum. On days of doubt, flipping through past entries reignites the belief that you can handle challenges because you already have. Over time, a win journal becomes more than motivation. It becomes a blueprint of success. Patterns emerge, showing which actions and mindsets consistently produce wins, so you can replicate them intentionally. In a world quick to highlight shortcomings, this private record becomes proof that you're moving forward, one win at a time. Limit input before creative work. Limiting input before creative work is the practice of shielding your mind from outside noise so your ideas can emerge original and untainted. It's about giving your brain space to generate rather than react. The moment you flood it with other people's opinions, headlines, or creations, your work unconsciously starts to mirror theirs. Inspiration is valuable, but too much input right before creating dilutes your own voice. Creativity thrives in stillness, yet modern life offers none. Most people wake up and immediately check messages, scroll social media, or read the news. By the time they sit down to work, their minds are full of external thoughts, fears, and agendas. The result: derivative ideas, diluted originality, and work that feels safe rather than alive. Limiting input allows you to approach creation with a mind that is fresh, unpolluted, and deeply connected to your intuition. The blank space feels uncomfortable at first. It's easier to consume than to produce. But in that quiet discomfort, your brain reaches inward, discovering deeper connections and solutions. This doesn't mean cutting off inspiration entirely. It means building a buffer. If you have creative work in the morning, resist checking your phone, email, or feeds until it's done. Let your mind wake up inside its own world, not someone else's. Your best work won't come from echoing what you've consumed. It will come from the raw, unfiltered place that emerges when you give it breathing room. Protect that space, and your ideas will surprise even you. Reframe criticism as free consulting. Reframing criticism as free consulting is the mental alchemy that turns what most see as an attack into a hidden advantage. At its core, it's about removing the sting from someone's judgment and seeing it as valuable feedback you didn't have to pay for. Most people shrink from criticism, letting it bruise their ego or shake their confidence. But when you treat it as expert insight, regardless of the source, you gain perspectives that can sharpen skills, strengthen ideas, and accelerate growth. The key is detachment. Instead of asking, "Why are they attacking me?" you ask, "What useful information can I extract here?" Sometimes the delivery is harsh, unkind, or wrong, but hidden in the noise may be a clue you need. That offhand comment about your presentation style might spark a way to communicate with double the impact. That blunt critique of strategy might reveal a blind spot invisible from inside your own perspective. Psychologically, this shift works because it moves you from defense to curiosity. Defensive minds close, curious minds open. You stop feeling like a victim and start acting like an investigator. Even if 90% of criticism is useless, the 10% that's true can save months of mistakes. Master this, and feedback stops being frightening. You welcome it because every critic becomes an unpaid consultant helping you refine your craft. The more you seek it instead of avoid it, the faster you evolve, because you're not just reacting to the world, you're letting the world sharpen you. Use chunking to remember more. Using chunking to remember more is the practice of grouping information into smaller, meaningful units so your brain can store and recall it more efficiently. The human mind struggles with endless, scattered details in short-term memory. Research shows we can hold about 7 items at once. But when you organize those details into structured clusters, your capacity expands dramatically. This works because the brain is a pattern recognition machine. It remembers shapes, sequences, and associations far better than disconnected data. That's why a phone number is easier to recall in 3 segments rather than 10 separate digits. The same principle applies to learning a language, memorizing a speech, or studying for an exam. Take the chaos and organize it into digestible pieces. Chunking doesn't just make memory easier, it speeds recall. Instead of retrieving each detail individually, you grab the whole chunk in one mental sweep. Musicians don't remember every note, they recall phrases. Chess masters don't memorize each piece, they recognize familiar configurations. You can supercharge chunking by giving meaning to each cluster, group facts by theme, sequence events into a story, or link ideas with vivid imagery. The more structure and emotional relevance you give a chunk, the more your brain clings to it. With chunking, you stop cramming random details and start building organized mental folders. Information stored in order instead of chaos becomes sharper, faster, and far easier to retrieve whenever you need it. Ask, what's the leverage point? Asking what's the leverage point is the mental habit of searching for the single action, decision, or adjustment that produces the biggest ripple with the least effort. At its core, this technique resists the urge to tackle problems head-on with brute force, instead pinpointing the spot where a small, well-placed push triggers outsized impact. Most people exhaust themselves on low-impact tasks, taking 10 minor actions instead of discovering the one move that makes those 10 unnecessary. The leverage point question changes the game by forcing you to zoom out, map the system, and identify the hidden hinge that everything else rotates around. In business, it could be automating a bottleneck that speeds up an entire workflow. In relationships, it might be addressing a single unspoken issue quietly undermining trust. In personal growth, it might be fixing one key habit that cascades into dozens of improvements. This works because systems, whether life, business, or human behavior, are interconnected. A change in the right place creates exponential results, while effort in the wrong place barely moves the needle. Asking this question ensures you focus on the highest yield action. When practiced consistently, you stop fighting fires and start reshaping landscapes. You're no longer merely working harder, you're working like a strategist, finding the point where one smart move changes everything. Use deliberate discomfort to grow. Using deliberate discomfort to grow is the conscious choice to step into situations that stretch, challenge, and unsettle you, because comfort is a cage and growth lives beyond it. Most people spend their lives avoiding unease, but those who pursue it intentionally become stronger, sharper, and more adaptable than the rest. Your mind and body are survival machines, wired to protect you, but safe and comfortable aren't the same. Comfort lulls you into stagnation. Discomfort drives adaptation. Lifting heavier weights tears muscles, so they rebuild stronger. Speaking in front of a crowd despite fear expands confidence. Tackling a skill you're bad at forms new neural connections. Discomfort is the training ground, where tolerance for uncertainty, pain, and failure is forged, essential elements of a meaningful life. Each voluntary choice stretches your limits so that when discomfort chooses you, you're ready. Deliberate discomfort can be physical, cold showers, intense workouts, fasting, or mental difficult conversations, public vulnerability, entering spaces where you're the least experienced. The specifics matter less than the principle. Make struggle your ally. Most believe growth comes first, and then readiness for discomfort. The truth is you grow because you embrace discomfort before you feel prepared. Each time you step into it on purpose, you send the message, I can handle this. That belief compounds until the unknown no longer intimidates. You actively seek it, knowing it is the doorway to your next level. Mentally simulate best and worst scenarios. Mentally simulating best and worst scenarios is the psychological rehearsal that equips you with confidence and resilience for whatever the future holds. At its core, it's about running vivid mental test drives of two extremes, the most successful outcome you can imagine and the most realistic disaster that could occur. This dual simulation transforms uncertainty from a source of paralysis into something you can navigate with clarity. Imagining the best-case scenario isn't idle daydreaming. It primes your brain for success. You see yourself taking the right actions, making smart moves, and feeling the emotional surge of achievement. This mental blueprint subtly nudges your subconscious toward those outcomes, building belief and focus. The true power, however, comes from pairing it with worst-case simulation. You deliberately picture the obstacles, failures, and setbacks that could derail you, not to terrify yourself, but to strip fear of its grip. Once you've confronted the worst in your mind and mapped out a plan, anxiety diminishes. What was once, "what if this goes wrong?" becomes, "if it goes wrong, here's what I'll do." That's the mindset of a strategist, not a victim. Psychologically, it works because the brain resists surprises. By living through extremes mentally, you reduce shock, respond calmly under pressure, and act decisively. With practice, uncertainty loses its power. You've already played the game in your mind. You know the risks, the steps, and the potential rewards. Now, all that remains is execution. Celebrate micro wins. Celebrating micro wins is the practice of noticing and rewarding even the tiniest steps forward, turning small progress into momentum for more. Most people wait for major milestones, finishing the book, landing the big client, hitting the six-figure mark, before allowing themselves to feel accomplished. The problem is that these big wins can take months or years, and without acknowledgement along the way, motivation wanes. Micro wins keep the drive alive. This works because the brain thrives on dopamine, the chemical of reward and motivation. Every time you recognize a small achievement, you reinforce the behavior that produced it, making it easier to keep moving forward, even when the ultimate goal is far off. It's the same psychology behind why video games are addictive. They deliver constant incremental rewards rather than waiting for the end. A micro win might be sending one crucial email, completing a tough workout, learning a new concept, or getting through a challenging day without giving up. Taking a moment to celebrate it, through a smile, a journal note, a fist pump, or sharing the win, trains your brain to link effort with satisfaction. Over time, these small wins accumulate, compounding into major accomplishments. Because you've honored each step, the journey feels energizing rather than draining. High performers don't wait for the big finish. They set up multiple finish lines along the way, understanding that success grows from tiny, consistent actions, and every single one deserves recognition. Use time boxing to protect deep work. Using time boxing to protect deep work is the practice of reserving fixed, non-negotiable blocks of time, where your most important cognitively demanding tasks get done without interruption, without multitasking, without compromise. At its core, this technique is about assigning a set window in your schedule for focused work and treating it as seriously as a critical meeting or a flight you cannot miss. Most people let their prime hours get hijacked by shallow tasks, emails, messages, errands, leaving important projects for fragmented periods with low energy. Time boxing reverses that by making deep work the first thing on your calendar, not the last. You block it explicitly. 9:11 a.m. strategy session, 3:30 p.m., writing chapter 3. No guessing, no squeezing it in. The time itself becomes the plan. This works because it creates a container for focus. Knowing you have exactly 2 hours sharpens your mind. Procrastination loses power because the window is finite. Protecting it from interruptions, no phone, no meetings, no drop-ins, lets you enter the state where your best ideas surface and complex problems get solved. Time boxing also builds rhythm. With consistent blocks, your brain learns to drop into deep focus on demand. Over time, you make high-level creativity and productivity predictable rather than rare. In a world addicted to distraction, time boxing isn't just a scheduling tactic. It's a statement that your best work is worth protecting fiercely. Practice gratitude before challenges. Practicing gratitude before challenges is the mental reset that transforms fear into fuel and uncertainty into opportunity. At its core, this technique is about deliberately identifying something to appreciate before stepping into a difficult situation, anchoring yourself in abundance rather than scarcity, strength rather than anxiety. It's not about pretending the challenge will be easy. It's about approaching it from a place of inner stability and perspective. Most people wait until after hardship to search for silver linings, but by then, the emotional storm has already hit. Gratitude beforehand acts like an emotional shield. It prevents stress from consuming you and primes your brain to see solutions faster. This works because gratitude triggers dopamine and serotonin, chemicals that elevate mood, sharpen focus, and calm the body's stress response. The practice can be simple yet powerful. Before a presentation, you might think, "I'm grateful for the chance to share my ideas." Before a tough conversation, I'm grateful we care enough to speak honestly. Before a personal struggle, I'm grateful for the strength this will help me build. Gratitude doesn't erase the challenge, but it changes how you enter it. Less as a victim bracing for impact, more as a participant ready to grow. When you approach challenges this way, you stop seeing them as threats to avoid and start viewing them as proving grounds. Gratitude becomes the lens that turns obstacles into stepping stones, letting you step into the fight already feeling you've gained something before it even begins. Seek simplicity on the far side of complexity. Seeking simplicity on the far side of complexity is the pursuit of clarity after you've wrestled with the full weight of a problem's chaos. It's not about oversimplifying or ignoring the messy details. It's about walking through the mess, mastering it, and emerging with an elegant, distilled truth. Albert Einstein hinted at this when he said, "Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler." This works because real understanding isn't found at the shallow, obvious level. At first, things appear simple because you don't know enough to see the complexity. Then, as you dig deeper, the details multiply. Contradictions emerge and everything feels tangled. This is where most people get stuck, buried in the complexity, drowning in nuance. But if you keep going, if you map the patterns, connect the dots, and strip away the non-essential, you eventually find the deeper simplicity that can only be seen from the other side. This simplicity has power. It's the clear formula that drives a business, the core principle that unlocks a skill, the one sentence that explains an entire philosophy. It's what allows experts to teach with ease, innovators to design with elegance, and leaders to make decisions quickly without losing depth. The far side of complexity isn't reached by avoiding hard thinking. It's earned by embracing it. And once you get there, you hold an advantage. You can explain the complicated in a way that makes people feel like they've known it all along.